Fix this engine and I'll marry you, deal? The words sliced through the Seattle repair shop like a blade, dripping with mockery. Billionaire CEO Claire Montgomery stood there in her $1,000 heels, laughing at the quiet mechanic covered in grease. Everyone watched. Everyone waited. But what she didn't know, what nobody knew, was that this single father hiding behind a wrench had once designed engines that touched the stars. And her cruelty? It was about to cost her everything she thought she'd never need, her heart. Stay with me until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain hammered against the glass windows of Montgomery Industries' executive garage like bullets, each drop a tiny percussion in the symphony of Seattle's perpetual gray. Inside, insulated from the storm by concrete and steel and $3 million worth of automotive engineering, Claire Montgomery stood with her arms crossed, her Valentino coat still perfectly draped across her shoulders, and murder in her ice-blue eyes. Her Aston Martin Valkyrie, custom-built, one of only 150 in the world, painted in a shade of midnight blue so deep it looked like liquid sapphire, refused to start. "Unacceptable," she hissed into her phone, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "I don't pay you people a premium to tell me you're working on it. I pay you to make problems disappear." On the other end, her personal mechanic, formerly her personal mechanic, stammered something about electrical systems and diagnostic computers. Claire didn't care about the details. She never had. That's what she paid people for. "You have 2 hours," she said, and ended the call with the kind of finality that had closed billion-dollar deals and ended careers. But 2 hours later, the car still sat silent. 3 hours after that, Claire Montgomery did something she hadn't done in 15 years. She admitted she needed help she couldn't buy with a phone call. "Davies Street Automotive," her assistant had suggested nervously, scrolling through her tablet. "They have a 5-star rating, and they're only a public garage?" Claire's perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "You want me to take a $3 million vehicle to a place that probably services soccer mom minivans?" "They specialize in high-performance imports, Ms. Montgomery. European, Japanese." "Fine." Claire snatched her keys from the desk. "But if there's so much as a fingerprint on the leather when I get it back, you're fired." The assistant had heard that threat before. So had the 12 assistants before her. What? Davies Street Automotive didn't look like much from the outside. Wedged between a Vietnamese restaurant and a laundromat in Seattle's industrial district, it was the kind of place Claire Montgomery would never notice, let alone enter. The building was old brick, probably from the 50s, with a faded sign that needed repainting and windows that could use a pressure wash. But the reviews didn't lie, and Claire Montgomery didn't make the same mistake twice. The tow truck had delivered her Valkyrie an hour ago. Now she stood in the waiting area, if you could call it that, surrounded by plastic chairs that looked like they'd survived 3 decades and coffee that smelled like it had been brewed during the Reagan administration. The place smelled like motor oil and old rubber and something else she couldn't identify. Honest work, maybe. The concept was foreign to her. Through the smudged window that separated the waiting room from the service bay, she could see her car, surrounded by men in coveralls who moved around it like priests approaching a shrine. "Ms. Montgomery?" Claire turned. The man approaching her was in his 50s, built like someone who'd spent his life lifting heavy things, with a face that had seen weather and wore it well. His coveralls had Davies stitched across the chest. "Jack Davies, I own the place." He wiped his hand on a rag before extending it. Claire looked at the hand like it was covered in disease, then back to his face. She didn't shake it. "My car," she said simply. "Can you fix it or not?" If Jack Davies was offended, he didn't show it. He'd probably seen worse. "We're running diagnostics now. The electrical system on the Valkyrie is complex, derived from Formula One technology. It's not something you can just—" "I don't need the Wikipedia entry," Claire interrupted. "I need a timeline." "Best guess? 3 days? Maybe 4? "Unacceptable. I need it tomorrow." Jack's weathered face didn't change. "Then you need a miracle, not a mechanic." "Then find me someone who can deliver both." For a long moment, Jack just studied her. Claire was used to that look, the one that said people were trying to decide if she was worth the hassle. Usually, her money made the decision for them. "I've got a new guy," Jack said finally. "Started 2 weeks ago. Doesn't talk much, keeps to himself, but I've never seen anyone read a system like him. Not just cars, any system. It's like he can see through metal. I don't care if he's a psychic. Can he fix my car? Honestly? Jack rubbed his jaw. If anyone can do it on your timeline, it's him. But no buts. Point me to him. Jack hesitated, then gestured toward the far corner of the service bay. Bay 7. Name's Nate Rhodes. Claire Montgomery walked into that service bay like a general surveying a battlefield. Her heels clicked against the concrete with military precision, each step an announcement of authority. Men looked up from their work, then quickly looked away when they met her eyes. She had that effect on people. Bay 7 was in the back corner, partially hidden behind a Mercedes that was elevated on a lift. The lighting was dimmer here, and for a moment Claire thought it was empty. Then she saw him. He was underneath a Ford pickup truck, American, probably 20 years old, held together more by faith than engineering. All she could see were his legs, covered in faded jeans that had actual holes from wear, not fashion, and work boots that had seen better years. A rolling creeper allowed him to slide in and out from under the chassis. "Excuse me," Claire said, her voice cutting through the ambient noise of the garage like a knife. The legs didn't move. "Excuse me," she repeated, louder this time. Still nothing. The sound of a ratchet echoed from under the truck. Claire Montgomery was not accustomed to being ignored. In her world, people jumped when she entered a room. They certainly didn't keep working on a pickup truck that probably wasn't worth the cost of the repair. She walked closer, her patience, never her strong suit, evaporating like water on hot metal. She could hear him breathing under there, the steady rhythm of someone completely absorbed in their work. "Are you deaf or just rude?" she snapped, and this time she nudged the creeper with her foot. Not quite a kick, but close enough. The ratcheting stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, deliberately, the creeper rolled out from under the truck. The first thing Claire noticed was his hands. They were covered in grease, the kind that gets into every line and crease, turning fingertips black. Mechanic's hands, working hands, hands that had never known the luxury of a manicure or the softness of a desk job. The second thing she noticed was his face. He wasn't what she expected. Maybe early 30s, with dark hair that needed a cut and a jawline that suggested he'd been handsome once before life had worn the shine off. But it was his eyes that stopped her voice in her throat. Dark brown, almost black, and completely, utterly calm. They looked at her with neither deference nor hostility. They simply looked at her like she was another problem to assess, another system to understand. "Can I help you?" His voice was quiet, measured, the kind of voice that didn't need to be loud to be heard. Claire recovered quickly. She always did. "Are you Nate Rhodes?" "I am." "Jack Davies says you're good with complex electrical systems." "Jack says a lot of things." "Are you or aren't you?" Claire's patience was a finite resource, and this man was depleting it rapidly. Nate Rhodes sat up on the creeper, studying her with those unsettling, calm eyes. "Depends on the system." Aston Martin Valkyrie. Complete electrical failure. Diagnostic computers can't find the fault. Claire crossed her arms. "Can you fix it, or should I stop wasting my time?" For the first time, something flickered in those dark eyes. Interest, maybe, or challenge. The Valkyrie uses a hybrid system derived from the Aston Martin Valkyrie AMR Pro Racing program, Nate said quietly. The electrical architecture is integrated with the V12 and the battery pack through a central control unit that manages power distribution across 17 separate systems. When it fails, it's usually not the system itself. It's a cascade effect from a single point of failure that the diagnostics miss because they're looking at the trees instead of the forest. Claire blinked. That was more words than she'd expected, and approximately 17 more technical details than she cared about. "So that's a yes?" Nate Rhodes looked at her for another long moment, then past her to where her Valkyrie sat in the middle of the bay like a sleeping predator. She watched his eyes trace the lines of the car, reading it like text. "Maybe," he said finally. "Let me look at it." "Now?" "You want it tomorrow, don't you?" It wasn't quite an answer, but Claire Montgomery didn't get where she was by accepting half measures. "Fine. Look at it. Then tell me if you can fix it." Nate stood up from the creeper, and Claire realized he was tall,
maybe 6'1", with the kind of lean build that came from actual physical work rather than expensive gym memberships. He wiped his hands on a rag that was already so dirty it probably made them worse, then walked past her toward her car without another word. Claire followed, irritation and curiosity fighting for dominance in her chest.
By the time she reached the Valkyrie, Nate was already inside it, sitting in the driver's seat with the door open, his grease-stained hands moving across the dashboard with surprising gentleness. He pressed the start button. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. Then he closed his eyes. Claire watched, confused, as this strange mechanic sat in her $3 million car with his eyes closed like he was meditating. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Listening," Nate said without opening his eyes. "To what? It's not making any sound." "Everything makes sound, Miss Montgomery. Claire Montgomery. Everything makes sound, Miss Montgomery. Even silence tells you something." Claire wanted to roll her eyes, wanted to snap that she didn't have time for Zen philosophy, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the complete certainty in his voice. Maybe it was the way his hands rested on the steering wheel like he was reading Braille. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only 2 minutes, Nate opened his eyes and got out of the car. He walked around it slowly, studying it from different angles, occasionally crouching to look underneath. "Well?" Claire's voice had more edge than she intended. Nate straightened, wiping his hands again, a nervous habit maybe, or just practical. "The diagnostic computers are right. There's no obvious fault. But the symptom pattern suggests a voltage drop somewhere in the primary power distribution. Could be a bad ground connection, could be a failing relay in the junction box, could be a short in the harness that only manifests under specific conditions. In English, please. It's like having a blackout in your house, but only in certain rooms and only sometimes. The problem isn't that there's no power coming in, it's that the power isn't getting where it needs to go. Can you fix it?" Nate looked at the car again, then back at her. "Probably, but it'll take time." "How much time? To do it right? 2 days? Maybe 3? I need it tomorrow." "Then you need someone willing to guess and replace parts until something works. That's not fixing it. That's gambling. And with this car, gambling means you could create new problems worse than the one you have." Claire Montgomery took a step closer to him, close enough that most people would have stepped back. Nate Rhodes didn't move. "Mr. Rhodes, I'm not interested in explanations or excuses. I have a dinner meeting tomorrow night that I cannot miss, and I will not arrive in anything less than my own car. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to fix this car by tomorrow evening, and you're going to do it right. And if you can't, then you're wasting both our time." Nate met her eyes, and for a moment Claire saw something that looked almost like amusement. "You must be really important," he said quietly. "Excuse me?" "The car. The attitude. The assumption that the laws of physics bend to your schedule." He shook his head slightly. "You must be really, really important." Claire Montgomery had faced down boardrooms full of hostile shareholders. She'd negotiated with foreign governments and stared down corporate raiders. She was not accustomed to being mocked by men in coveralls. "I don't think you understand who you're talking to," she said, her voice dropping to the temperature of liquid nitrogen. "Claire Montgomery, CEO of Montgomery Industries. Net worth somewhere north of $2 billion, depending on the stock price. Youngest woman to ever helm a Fortune 500 company, known as the Ice Queen by Business Insider and the Barracuda by your competitors." Nate recited the facts like he was reading a grocery list. "Did I miss anything?" Claire stared at him. "How do you—" "Google, you're not exactly subtle with that custom license plate." She looked back at her car. He was right. Her vanity plate read CM-ON-TG1. Subtle had never been her brand. "So you know who I am," Claire said, recovering her composure. "Then you know that disappointing me is bad for business." "Is it?" Nate tilted his head slightly. "Are you going to leave bad Yelp reviews, get me fired, destroy my career?" There was no anger in his voice, no fear, just genuine curiosity. "I could." "You could," he agreed, "but you won't get your car fixed by tomorrow. See, Ms. Montgomery, here's the thing about machines. They don't care about your net worth. They don't care about your meetings or your deadlines or your threats. They work on their own timeline, and if you try to rush them, they break. sometimes permanently. Claire felt heat rising in her chest. Anger, yes, but something else too, something she didn't have a name for. "So that's a no?" she said icily. "That's a let me think about it." Nate walked back to the car, popped the hood, and stared down into the engine bay. The Valkyrie's engine was a work of art, a 5-liter V12 that produced 1,160 horsepower, surrounded by carbon fiber and exotic metals and electronics worth more than most people's houses. Nate stood there for a long time, his eyes moving over the engine like he was reading poetry. Finally, he spoke without looking at her. If I try to do this on your timeline, I'm not making any promises. Maybe I find it in 6 hours. Maybe I don't find it at all. Maybe I find it and discover the part I need won't be here until next week. But you'll try. I'll try. He closed the hood with more care than she'd ever seen anyone handle her property. Then he turned to face her again, and this time there was something different in his eyes. A challenge. "But I have a condition." Claire Montgomery did not accept conditions. She gave them. "What?" The word came out sharper than she intended. Nate Rhodes looked at her, and for just a moment she saw what might have been a smile ghost across his face. "If I fix this car, and I mean really fix it, so it runs perfectly, you have to do something for me. Name it. I'll tell you when I fix the car." "That's not how negotiations work, Mr. Rhodes." "It is when you're the one who needs something, Ms. Montgomery." They stared at each other across the hood of the Aston Martin, and Claire Montgomery felt something she hadn't felt in years. Someone treating her like a person instead of a checkbook. She should have walked away. Should have called a tow truck, taken the car to the dealership in San Francisco, flown down in her private helicopter. Should have reminded this nobody mechanic that she didn't negotiate with people who worked on their backs in the dirt. Instead, she heard herself say, "Fine. Fix the car. Name your price." Nate nodded once, then walked to the service bay's tool cabinet. When he came back, he was carrying a tablet and what looked like a small laptop. He set them on a rolling cart next to the Valkyrie and got to work without another word. Claire stood there for a moment, uncertain. She wasn't used to being dismissed, especially not after making a deal. But Nate Rhodes had already forgotten she existed. His entire focus was on the car, on the diagnostic screen, on whatever invisible problem he was hunting. She turned to leave, her heels clicking on the concrete. "Ms. Montgomery?" His voice stopped her at the door to the waiting room. "What?" "This is going to take a while. The waiting room's not comfortable. You should go home. Come back tomorrow." "I'll decide what I should do, Mr. Rhodes." "Suit yourself." He plugged a cable into the car's diagnostic port and turned back to his screens. Claire Montgomery stood in that doorway for a full minute, watching this man ignore her with the kind of complete indifference she'd only ever dreamed of having. Then, against every instinct she had, she walked back to the waiting room, sat down in one of those terrible plastic chairs, and waited. 3 hours later, Claire was still waiting. She'd made 17 phone calls. She'd answered 43 emails. She'd reviewed and approved 2 acquisition proposals, denied 3 budget requests, and fired 1 regional manager who'd missed his quarterly targets. She'd done more work from that plastic chair than most people did from their offices. But she hadn't left. Through the window, she could see Nate Rhodes working. He moved with the kind of quiet efficiency that came from deep competence. No wasted motion, no frustration, just steady, methodical problem solving. At one point, Jack Davies brought him what looked like a sandwich and a coffee. Nate ate while staring at the diagnostic screen, his eyes never leaving the data scrolling past. At another point, 2 of the other mechanics came over to look at what he was doing. She could see them talking, gesturing at the engine bay, but she couldn't hear the words. After a few minutes, they drifted away, shaking their heads. The sun was setting by the time Nate straightened up from the engine bay, rolled his shoulders, and closed the hood. Claire stood up so fast her phone nearly fell off her lap. When Nate walked into the waiting room, he looked tired. Not defeated, just tired. There was a new smudge of grease across his forehead, and his hands were even blacker than before. "Well?" Claire asked. "Found it," Nate said. "Corroded ground connection in the battery junction box, creating intermittent voltage drops that cascaded through the control unit. The diagnostic computers couldn't see it because it only manifested under specific load conditions. English, Mr. Rhodes. Rust on a wire. I cleaned it, reinforced it, tested it. Your car will start now. Claire felt something unexpected bloom in her chest. Relief, maybe, or vindication. She'd been right to trust him. Show me, she said. They walked back to the service bay together. The other mechanics had mostly left for the day, heading home to families and lives that didn't involve electronic automotive systems. The garage felt bigger in the gathering darkness, emptier. Nate opened the driver's door and gestured for her to get in. Claire slid behind the wheel, and for the first time in 48 hours, she felt like herself again. This car fit her like a second skin. She knew every curve, every response, every sound it should make. She pressed the start button. The engine roared to life with a sound like God clearing his throat, a deep, visceral bellow that climbed to a howl as the tachometer needle swept toward redline, then settled into a purr so perfect it made her heart ache. Claire Montgomery felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them away angrily. It was just a car, just a machine, just metal and wires and exotic materials assembled by people who charged too much money. But it was her car, and it was perfect again. She let it idle for a moment, feeling the vibration through the steering wheel, listening to the symphony of combustion and electronics working in perfect harmony. Then she turned it off and looked at Nate Rhodes, who stood nearby with his hands in his pockets and something that might have been satisfaction on his face. "It's fixed," she said unnecessarily. "It's fixed," he agreed. Claire got out of the car, and for a moment they just stood there, looking at each other in the fluorescent light of the service bay. "You have something you want from me," Claire said. "Name it." Nate was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, actually smiled, and it changed his whole face, made him look younger and somehow sadder at the same time. "Do you remember what you said when you first walked up to me?" Claire tried to recall. It felt like years ago instead of hours. "I asked if you could fix my car." "Before that, when I was under the truck. When you kicked my creeper to get my attention." Claire felt heat rise in her cheeks. Not embarrassment exactly, but something close to it. "I didn't kick it. I nudged it." "You asked if I was deaf or rude," Nate said quietly. Like those were the only two explanations for why someone wouldn't immediately respond to you. "I don't see what that has to do with—" "Do you know why I was under that truck, Ms. Montgomery? The one that's probably worth less than your watch?" Claire looked down at her Patek Philippe. He was right. Why? Because the guy who owns it is a single father, works 2 jobs, construction during the day, security at night. His truck is 23 years old. It's ugly, it leaks oil, the transmission slips, but it's paid for and he can't afford a car payment and he needs it to get to work. And he needs to get to work because he has a 7-year-old daughter who needs school clothes and groceries and all the things kids need. I still don't see... He paid me in cash this morning. $300 he probably didn't have. Not enough to cover the parts, definitely not enough to cover the labor. But I'm going to fix his truck anyway because that's what you do when fixing something means the difference between someone making rent or getting evicted. Claire stared at him. "That's nice, Mr. Rhodes. Charitable. But what does it have to do with my car?" "Everything, Miss Montgomery. Because you're standing here assuming that everyone exists to serve you, that money means you can treat people like inconveniences, that the world runs on your schedule." Nate's voice was still quiet, still calm, but there was steel underneath it now. "And I'm standing here thinking about how I just spent 3 hours fixing a toy for someone who wouldn't even shake my boss's hand when he offered it." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Claire Montgomery had been called many things in her life. Ruthless, brilliant, cold, the Ice Queen, the Barracuda. She'd been called names in boardrooms and in profile pieces and probably in bedrooms after she'd left them. None of it had ever bothered her, but something about the way this grease-stained mechanic looked at her made her feel small. "You want an apology?" she said, and her voice came out harder than she intended. "Fine, I'm sorry I interrupted your charity work to ask you to do your actual job." "I don't want an apology," Nate said. "I want you to understand something." "What?" "That people aren't systems. You can't just throw money at them and expect them to work the way you want. They're messy and complicated, and they break in ways you can't predict. And sometimes, Ms. Montgomery, the most important repairs are the ones that don't come with a price tag. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that the world absolutely did run on money and power and knowing which buttons to push. Wanted to remind him that she'd built an empire on understanding exactly how to make people work the way she wanted. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the way he looked at her. Not with anger or judgment, but with something that looked almost like pity. Maybe it was the fact that he'd fixed her car when no one else could. Maybe it was just exhaustion. "What do you want from me?" she asked instead. Nate reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. He held it out to her. Claire looked down. It was a spark plug, old, corroded, clearly no longer functional. "What is this?" "Keep it," Nate said, as a reminder. Of what? That even the most expensive machines break down to the same basic principles. Fuel, air, spark. Remove any one of those elements, and it doesn't matter how much money you spent, it won't run. He closed her fingers around the spark plug. Same with people, Miss Montgomery. We're all just trying to keep our engines running. For a moment, Claire just stood there, holding this worthless piece of metal in her hand. Then she looked up at Nate Rhodes, really looked at him, maybe for the first time, and saw someone who'd probably been broken down and rebuilt more times than her Valkyrie. "That's it?" she said quietly. "That's your price? A philosophy lesson and a broken spark plug?" "That's it," Claire laughed. She couldn't help it. The sound echoed through the empty garage, harsh and unexpected. "You could have asked for anything, money, a job, a favor. I would have given it to you." "I know." "And you chose this?" "I did." Claire turned the spark plug over in her hand, feeling its weight, its roughness. "You're either the wisest man I've ever met or the stupidest." "Probably a little of both," Nate said, and that ghost of a smile was back. Claire Montgomery slipped the spark plug into her coat pocket and pulled out her phone. "How much do I owe you for the repair?" $600 for the parts and labor. Shop rate." Claire started to laugh again, then realized he was serious. $600? I was prepared to pay 10 times that. "Then donate the difference to a charity," Nate said. "Or don't. It's your money." She stared at him for another long moment, then pulled up her payment app and sent Jack Davies' shop $6,000. $600 for the repair, she said. "The rest is for the guy with the truck. Tell him it's from an anonymous donor." Nate's eyes widened slightly. "Miss Montgomery, you don't have to." "I know I don't have to. I want to." She slipped her phone back into her pocket. "Consider it my tuition for today's philosophy lesson." For the first time, Nate Rhodes looked uncertain. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. Just fix his truck." Claire walked toward her car, then paused. "And Mr. Rhodes, the next time someone rudely interrupts your work, you should probably say something. The world has too many people like me and not enough people like you." She got in her Valkyrie, started the engine. It roared to life perfectly, just like he'd promised, and drove out of that garage into the Seattle rain without looking back. But that night, alone in her penthouse apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, Claire Montgomery pulled the spark plug out of her pocket and set it on her desk. She stared at it for a long time, this worthless piece of metal that a strange mechanic thought was worth more than money. And for the first time in 15 years since the day she'd sworn she'd never let anyone make her feel small again, Claire Montgomery wondered if maybe she'd been measuring success with the wrong ruler all along. She picked up her phone and drafted an email to her assistant. "Find out everything you can about Nate Rhodes. Employment history, education, family, everything." Then she deleted it. Some mysteries, she decided, deserved to remain unsolved. Some people deserve to keep their privacy, to stay hidden in their corners of the world where they fixed trucks for single fathers and spoke to billionaire CEOs like they were human beings who needed to learn something. Claire set down her phone and picked up the spark plug again, turning it over in her hands. Fuel, air, spark. The basic elements of combustion, of movement, of life. She wondered what element she'd been missing all these years. And in a garage across town, Nate Rhodes finished fixing the single father's truck, locked up the shop, and drove home in his own vehicle, a 10-year-old Honda with 160,000 miles and a passenger seat that still had a booster seat in it. He was thinking about a woman in expensive heels who'd looked at him like he was nothing, and then like he was something, and then like he was a question she didn't know how to answer. He wondered if their paths would cross again. He hoped not. People like Claire Montgomery were beautiful and dangerous in equal measure, like the cars they drove, engineered for speed and power but prone to catastrophic failure when something small went wrong. Nate had enough broken things in his life. He didn't need to add a billionaire to the list. But as he pulled into the driveway of his small rental house in a neighborhood that would never see an Aston Martin, as he quietly opened the door and checked on the small girl sleeping in the bedroom with the nightlight shaped like stars, as he stood in the doorway and watched her breathe with the kind of desperate attention that only parents of sick children understand, Nate Rhodes thought about Claire Montgomery one more time. And he wondered if maybe, just maybe, she was more broken than he'd realized. And maybe, just maybe, some broken things were worth fixing, even if they came with a price tag you couldn't afford. He closed his daughter's door softly and went to bed, where he dreamed of engines that wouldn't start, and women with ice in their eyes, and little girls who needed their fathers to be strong enough to hold the world together with nothing but grease and hope and love. The rain continued to fall on Seattle, washing the streets clean, carrying away the day's debris, and tomorrow, like every tomorrow, would bring new problems to solve, new systems to understand, new ways to fail or succeed at keeping the engines running. But tonight, in that small house with its cracked driveway and its overgrown lawn, and its father who'd once reached for stars but now reached only for whatever would keep his daughter alive one more day, there was peace. And across the city, in a penthouse worth more than most people would earn in a lifetime, a woman sat alone with a spark plug and wondered what it meant to be human instead of successful. Neither of them knew that their story was just beginning. Neither of them knew that sometimes the most important repairs are the ones that break you open first. And neither of them knew that a little girl with a failing heart would be the one to teach them both what fuel, air, and spark really meant when you applied them to a life instead of an engine. But they would learn. They would all learn. 3 weeks passed before Claire Montgomery thought about the spark plug again. Not because she'd forgotten. Claire Montgomery never forgot anything, especially not things that made her uncomfortable. But because thinking about it meant thinking about him, and thinking about him meant confronting questions she'd spent 15 years successfully avoiding. But the universe has a way of forcing confrontations, especially when you're running from them. It started with the smell. Claire was in the middle of a video conference with her board of directors, explaining why the Taipei acquisition was worth the premium they were paying when she caught it. Faint, chemical, wrong. Like burning rubber mixed with something sweet and toxic. She paused mid-sentence, her nose wrinkling. "Ms. Montgomery?" One of the board members leaned toward his camera. "Are you all right?" "Fine," she said automatically, but she wasn't. The smell was getting stronger. She glanced around her office, 1,800 square feet of minimalist luxury on the 43rd floor, but saw nothing obviously on fire. Then her assistant burst through the door without knocking, which meant emergency. "The parking garage," Jennifer gasped. "Your car!" Claire was out of her chair before the sentence finished. The board of directors found themselves staring at an empty screen as their CEO disappeared without explanation, which was somehow both surprising and completely expected. She took the elevator down 30 floors, her heart hammering in a way that had nothing to do with exertion and everything to do with the primal fear of losing something irreplaceable. The smell got worse the lower she went, acrid and thick enough to taste. When the elevator doors opened on the parking level, she saw smoke. Not a lot, just a thin gray haze hanging in the air like fog, but enough to make her throat tighten. Her Valkyrie sat in its reserved spot, and even from 50 feet away she could see something was wrong. The hood was slightly open, and wisps of smoke curled out from underneath like dying breath. The building's security guard, Thompson, she thought his name was, stood nearby with a fire extinguisher, looking uncertain. "I didn't touch anything, Ms. Montgomery," he said quickly, "but I called 911 and notified building maintenance. The fire department should be here in—" "Open the hood," Claire interrupted. "Ma'am, I don't think that's—" "Open it." Thompson set down the extinguisher and approached the car like it might explode. Maybe it would. Claire didn't care. She walked right up beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from the engine bay. When he popped the hood fully open, the smoke thickened briefly, then began to dissipate. Claire stared down at her engine, her perfect,
$3 million engine that had been running flawlessly for 3 weeks and saw melted plastic, scorched wiring, and what looked like a small fire that had burned itself out. Jesus, Thompson breathed. Claire pulled out her phone and called the last number she'd sworn she wouldn't call. He answered on the third ring. Davies Automotive, this is Nate. My car is on fire. Claire's voice was remarkably steady considering her hands were shaking. A pause. Miss Montgomery? Well, it was on fire. Now it's just smoking, but something definitely burned. The wiring, I think. The plastic. Where are you? His voice had changed, gone sharp and focused. My office building. Underground parking. I haven't driven it since yesterday morning, and when I got here this morning, everything was fine, and now— Don't touch anything, Nate interrupted. Is the fire out? Yes. Completely out? No flames, no glowing metal? Claire looked down at the engine bay again. The smoke was almost gone now, leaving behind the acrid smell and the evidence of catastrophe. Yes, it's out. Good. Don't try to start it. Don't touch the battery. Don't let anyone else touch anything. She could hear movement on his end, the rustle of fabric, the jingle of keys. What's the address? Claire gave it to him, her brain cataloging the strangeness of the situation even as she spoke. She was calling a mechanic, not her mechanic, not even a mechanic she paid a retainer to, because something in her chest had insisted that if anyone could understand what went wrong, it was him. I'll be there in 20 minutes, Nate said. Probably less if traffic cooperates. Just keep people away from it until I get there. Why? Is it dangerous? Depends on what caused the fire. If it's an electrical short, probably not. If it's something with the fuel system or the battery pack, maybe. I won't know until I see it. 20 minutes? Claire repeated. 20 minutes, Nate confirmed, and ended the call. Claire stood there in the parking garage with smoke in her lungs and Thompson hovering nearby looking confused, and realized she was trusting a man she'd met once for 3 hours to come save her car. A man who'd given her a spark plug and a lecture about humanity. A man who probably thought she was exactly the kind of entitled billionaire who deserved to have her expensive toys catch fire. She should have called the dealership, should have called her insurance company, should have called literally anyone else. But she'd called him. 18 minutes later, Claire had been counting. A 10-year-old Honda pulled into the garage and parked in a visitor spot. Nate Rhodes got out wearing the same faded jeans and work boots, though this time his shirt was clean and his hands were free of grease. He carried a toolbox in one hand and what looked like a diagnostic tablet in the other. He walked up to her car without greeting her, without small talk, and stopped dead when he saw the engine bay. Shit, he said quietly. That bad? That's not good. Nate set down his toolbox and leaned over the engine, his eyes scanning the damage with systematic precision. After a moment, he pulled a flashlight from his pocket and started tracing individual wires, following their paths through the serpentine complexity of the engine bay. Claire watched him work, remembering this focus from before. The world could be ending around Nate Rhodes and he wouldn't notice, not when there was a system to understand, a problem to solve. This shouldn't have happened, he said after several minutes. Obviously. No, I mean, he straightened, wiping soot off his hands onto his jeans. The work I did 3 weeks ago was nowhere near this section of the engine. This is the climate control wiring harness. Different system entirely. So what caused it? Nate shook his head slowly. Could be a lot of things. Manufacturing defect, rodent damage, voltage spike from a bad charging system. But he bent down again, this time using his flashlight to peer deep into the engine bay, contorting his body to see around the V12. Miss Montgomery, when did you last drive the car? Yesterday morning, like I said. And it was fine? No warning lights, no strange smells, nothing unusual? Nothing. It was perfect. Nate was quiet for a long moment, his flashlight beam moving across scorched plastic and melted rubber. Then he stood up and pulled out his phone, holding it over the engine bay and taking several photographs from different angles. What are you doing? Claire asked. Documenting. He took another photo, this time focusing on something specific that Claire couldn't identify. Ms. Montgomery, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. All right. Has anyone else worked on this car since I fixed it?
Claire thought back over the past 3 weeks. No, just routine maintenance at my building. They check the tire pressure, add washer fluid, that kind of thing, but no actual mechanical work. Who does that maintenance? The building has a service contract with some company. I don't know which one. She paused. Why? Instead of answering, Nate took one more photograph, then scrolled through the images he'd captured. His face was unreadable, but Claire knew that look. She wore it in boardrooms when she'd spotted something wrong in a presentation, but wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. Tell me, she said. It might be nothing. Tell me anyway. Nate turned his phone around, showing her one of the photos. It was a close-up of some wiring, melted and charred, but Claire couldn't see what he was seeing. Look here. He zoomed in on part of the image. See these 2 wires? They're from different systems. One is for the climate control, one is for the headlight circuit. They should never touch. They're insulated. They're routed separately. They're in different harnesses. But they're touching in the photo. They're not just touching, Ms. Montgomery. They're stripped. Someone removed the insulation and twisted them together. The words hung in the air like smoke. Are you saying someone sabotaged my car? Claire's voice was very quiet. I'm saying someone modified your car in a way that would definitely cause an electrical short, which would definitely cause a fire, which would definitely total the vehicle if it happened while you were driving on the highway. Nate put his phone away. But I'm also saying I could be wrong. Maybe it's just damage from the fire itself. Maybe the insulation melted off and they touched by accident. Maybe you don't believe that. No, Nate admitted. Nate, I don't. Claire Montgomery had survived hostile takeovers and attempted boardroom coups. She'd received death threats from environmental activists and hate mail from shareholders who thought a woman had no business running a manufacturing company. She'd been followed by private investigators hired by competitors and had her office swept for bugs twice a year. But she'd never had someone try to kill her with her own car. I need you to fix it, she said. Miss Montgomery, I need you to fix it, and I need you to figure out who did this. Nate stared at her. I'm a mechanic, not a detective. You should call the police. And tell them what? That maybe someone tampered with my car? That you think some wires were stripped, but you're not sure? They'll write a report and file it away and nothing will happen. Claire crossed her arms. But you can fix it, and while you're fixing it, you can figure out how someone did this without leaving obvious evidence. And once we know how, we can figure out who. That's not, name your price, Mr. Rhodes. It's not about price. Nate's voice was firm. This is serious. If someone really did sabotage your car, that's attempted murder. You need professionals. You are a professional. Not that kind. They stared at each other across the hood of her smoking Valkyrie, and Claire saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Concern. Not for himself, not for the car, but for her. Like she was a person who might actually be in danger rather than a walking checkbook who could buy her way out of anything. It made her chest feel strange. Please, she said quietly, and the word felt foreign in her mouth. Claire Montgomery didn't beg. She demanded, she ordered, she negotiated. But this man with his honest eyes and his careful hands was looking at her like she mattered, and it made her want to be someone who deserved that look. Nate sighed. I'll tow it to the shop. I'll fix it. I'll document everything I find, and then you're calling the police. Agreed. And you're getting better security for your parking garage. Already making the call. Claire pulled out her phone. And Ms. Montgomery? Nate waited until she looked at him. Until we figure this out, you might want to consider other transportation. I can fix the car, but I can't protect you from whoever did this. I can protect myself, Mr. Rhodes. Can you? It wasn't a challenge, just a genuine question. Because the kind of person who sabotages a car like this isn't going to stop just because it didn't work the first time. Claire thought about her penthouse with its security system, and her office with its panic buttons, and her life with its carefully constructed walls designed to keep everyone at a distance where they couldn't hurt her. She thought about enemies. She had plenty. And whether any of them hated her enough to commit murder. The answer was probably yes. I'll be careful, she said finally. Nate nodded, but he didn't look convinced. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Jack, it's Nate. I need you to send a flatbed to... He looked at Claire and she gave him the address again. Yeah, Aston Martin. Possible sabotage. I'll explain when I get back. He ended the call and turned back to the car. The truck will be here in 30 minutes. I'll follow it back to the shop and start the repair. How long? Depends on the damage. Could be a few days, could be a week. I need it faster. Ms. Montgomery, the car was on fire. Fast isn't... I have the Seattle Automotive Gala this Saturday. I'm receiving an award. I will not arrive in a rental car. Nate looked at her like she'd just told him she planned to juggle chainsaws during the ceremony. Someone just tried to kill you and you're worried about appearances at a party? It's not a party. It's the single most important networking event of the year for automotive manufacturing on the West Coast. And yes, I'm worried about appearances, because appearances are everything in my world, Mr. Rhodes. Then rent something impressive. I own something impressive. I want it fixed. They were back to staring at each other, and Claire could feel the frustration radiating off him in waves. Good. Let him be frustrated. Let him see what it was like to deal with someone who didn't bend just because you made logical arguments and had moral high ground. 3 days? Nate said finally. That's the best I can do. And that's if I work around the clock and nothing goes wrong and I don't find more damage than what I can see right now. 3 days? Done. And you owe me another favor. Claire's eyebrow arched. Another broken spark plug? I haven't decided yet. That's not how... It is now. Nate pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. It was simple white cardstock with just a name and phone number, no title or logo. Call me if anything else happens, anything strange, anything suspicious, anything that makes you nervous. And I mean it about being careful. Claire took the card, her fingers brushing his for just a moment. His hands were clean today, but she could still see the permanent stains in the creases, the small scars that came from years of working with sharp metal and hot engines. Hands that fixed things. Hands that built instead of destroyed. Why do you care? She asked quietly. Nate looked surprised by the question. What? Why do you care if something happens to me? I was rude to you. I kicked your creeper. I treated you like you existed to serve me. So why do you care whether someone tries to kill me or not? For a long moment, Nate didn't answer. He just looked at her with those dark, steady eyes that saw too much. Because everyone deserves to be safe, Miss Montgomery, he said finally. Even people who kick creepers. Then he turned and walked back to his Honda, leaving Claire standing alone in the parking garage with smoke in her lungs and something uncomfortable blooming in her chest that felt dangerously close to guilt. The flatbed arrived 23 minutes later. 2 men she didn't know loaded her Valkyrie with the kind of care usually reserved for museum pieces, which it basically was. Claire watched them secure it to the truck, watched them drive away with her baby, and felt the loss like a physical thing. Then she pulled out her phone and made 3 calls. The first was to her head of security, demanding a full audit of her parking garage access logs and security camera footage. The second was to her personal attorney, instructing him to begin a quiet investigation into anyone who might want her dead, competitors, disgruntled employees, activists, anyone. The third was to Jennifer, telling her to clear everything non-essential from her calendar for the rest of the day. Because Claire Montgomery needed to think. And thinking meant going home, pouring a scotch she wouldn't drink, and standing at her floor-to-ceiling windows watching the city move below her like blood through veins while she tried to figure out who hated her enough to commit murder. The list was longer than she wanted to admit, but as the afternoon light faded and the city began its transformation from business to nightlife, as Claire stood there in her perfect apartment holding her untouched scotch and staring at nothing, she found herself thinking not about enemies or sabotage or security protocols. She was thinking about a mechanic who'd asked her why she cared, and wondering when she'd become the kind of person who needed to be asked that question. The next day, Claire took an Uber to work. It felt wrong, like admitting defeat, but Nate's words kept echoing in her head. The kind of person who sabotages a car like this isn't going to stop. She spent the morning in meetings that felt hollow and pointless. Every time someone mentioned quarterly projections or market share, she wanted to scream that none of it mattered if she was dead. But she didn't scream. She nodded and made decisions and signed approvals and played the role of the Ice Queen with the same precision she'd perfected over 15 years. At lunch, she couldn't eat. At 2 o'clock, Nate called. "I need you to come to the shop," he said without preamble. "What did you find?" "Just come, please." The please was what convinced her. Claire canceled her 3 o'clock, ignored Jennifer's protests, and took another Uber across the city to Davies Automotive. The shop looked different in daylight, less menacing, more mundane. Just a building where people fixed cars and went home to their lives. When she walked in, Jack Davies was behind the counter and looked up with something that might have been sympathy. "He's in Bay 7, Jack said. "Fair warning, he's been up all night. He might be a little punchy." Claire walked through the waiting room into the service bay and immediately saw what Jack meant. Nate was sitting on the floor next to her disassembled Valkyrie, surrounded by parts and wiring harnesses and what looked like every diagnostic tool the shop owned. His eyes were red-rimmed, his hair was standing up in directions hair shouldn't stand, and he had that particular kind of exhaustion that came from running on nothing but caffeine and obsession. He looked up when she approached, and the expression on his face made her chest tighten. "Show me your phone," he said. "What?" "Your phone. Let me see it." Claire pulled out her iPhone, confused. Nate took it from her, turned it over in his hands, then handed it back. "When did you last update your security settings?" "I don't know. My IT department handles that. Why?" Instead of answering, Nate stood up and walked to a laptop balanced on top of a toolbox. He typed something, then turned the screen toward her. It was a map of Seattle. A blue dot pulsed on the screen, marking a location Claire recognized immediately, her office building. "That's your car," Nate said quietly. "Or rather, that's where your car's GPS system thinks it is because that's what the diagnostic computer is telling me." "I don't understand." "Someone hacked your car's computer system, Ms. Montgomery. Not just the electrical system, the whole thing. GPS, diagnostics, entertainment system, everything. They had complete access to your vehicle's location, speed, driving patterns." He pulled up another screen showing data that meant nothing to Claire, but clearly meant everything to Nate. They knew exactly when you drove the car, where you parked it, how long it sat idle, and they used that information to time the sabotage perfectly. Claire felt cold. How is that possible? Modern cars are computers on wheels. Everything's connected, to the internet, to your phone, to cloud services. It makes them convenient. It also makes them vulnerable. Nate rubbed his eyes. The question is how they got access in the first place. These systems are supposed to be secure. Breaking in requires either serious hacking skills or physical access to the vehicle. "The maintenance people," Claire said immediately. "The ones who check the tire pressure." "Maybe, but there's something else." Nate pulled up a different screen. "I found spyware in your car's system. Not just a hack to cause the fire, actual surveillance software. Someone's been tracking you, Ms. Montgomery, for weeks, maybe months." The cold feeling spread. "Tracking me how?" "Everywhere you drive. Everyone you meet, at least everyone you drive to meet. Your patterns, your routines, your habits." His voice was gentle but firm. "This isn't just someone who wanted your car to catch fire. This is someone who's been studying you, learning you, planning something bigger." Claire sat down on a rolling stool before her legs could give out. "Can you tell who installed it?" "No. Whoever did this knew what they were doing. They covered their tracks well. But Ms. Montgomery..." Nate crouched down so he was at eye level with her. "You need to take this to the police. This is way beyond a car repair. This is stalking, hacking, attempted murder. This is serious." "They won't be able to do anything," Claire heard herself say. "I have enemies, Mr. Rhodes. Powerful enemies. People with resources and motivation. The police will write a report and tell me to be careful and maybe assign a patrol car to drive past my building a few extra times, but they won't stop whoever did this." "Then hire private security." "I have private security. Better private security." Claire laughed, and it came out brittle. "You know what the funny thing is? I've spent 15 years building walls, security systems, background checks, NDAs, attack lawyers. I've made myself untouchable, and someone still got close enough to wire my car to burn." Nate was quiet for a moment, then he said, "Can I show you something?" "What?"
He walked to the corner of the bay and picked up a small object, then brought it back to her. It was a teddy bear, old, worn, missing one eye, its fur matted from years of being loved. "This is Mr. Patches," Nate said, and his voice had changed, gone soft with memory. "My daughter Stella's teddy bear. She's had him since she was born, sleeps with him every night, takes him to doctor's appointments, won't go anywhere without him." Claire looked at the bear, confused about where this was going. "Last year," Nate continued, "we were at the hospital. Stella has a heart condition. We're there a lot. And we got home and realized we'd left Mr. Patches behind. It was 10 at night. Stella was already in bed, but she woke up crying because Mr. Patches wasn't there." He turned the bear over in his hands. "I drove back to the hospital. It's 40 minutes each way. And the whole time I was driving, I was thinking about how ridiculous it was. It's just a stuffed animal, just fabric and stuffing and plastic eyes. It has no value. It doesn't do anything. But to Stella, it's everything." "I don't see what this has to do with—" "My point is that security isn't just about walls and systems and keeping people out," Nate interrupted gently. "It's about knowing what's worth protecting and why. And sometimes the things we think are valuable aren't. And sometimes the things we think are worthless are everything." He handed her the teddy bear. Claire took it automatically, feeling the worn fabric, the places where Stella's small hands had held it so many times, the fur had rubbed away completely. "You think I'm protecting the wrong things," Claire said quietly. "I think you're protecting yourself from the wrong threats." Nate sat down on the floor, his back against her disassembled car. "Someone wants to hurt you, Ms. Montgomery, and they're smart enough and patient enough to plan it carefully. That's scary. But you know what's scarier? Realizing that all your walls and security systems and careful distance didn't stop them, because they were never trying to break through your defenses. They were just waiting for you to drive away from them." Claire stared at the teddy bear in her hands and felt something crack open in her chest, something that had been frozen for so long she'd forgotten it was there. "I don't know how to do this," she whispered. "I don't know how to be someone who needs help." "Then learn." Nate's voice was kind but firm. "Because whatever's coming, Ms. Montgomery, you can't face it alone. Not this time." They sat there in the quiet of the garage, surrounded by the pieces of her $3 million car, and Claire Montgomery held a teddy bear that belonged to a little girl she'd never met, and wondered when her life had become something that could be fixed with wrenches and wisdom instead of money and power. "Will you help me?" she asked, and the question felt like jumping off a cliff. "Help you how?" "Figure out who did this, why they did it, how to stop them." She looked up at him. "You see systems, Mr. Rhodes. You understand how things work, how they break, how to fix them. Help me understand this system. Help me see what I'm missing." Nate was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "On one condition." "Name it." "Tomorrow's Saturday. The shop's closed. Come by at 2 o'clock. "Why?" "You'll see. That's the condition. You show up, no questions, no excuses." Claire wanted to argue, wanted to demand answers, wanted to maintain control of the situation. But something in his eyes stopped her. The same thing that had made her call him when her car was on fire. The same thing that made her trust him now, even though he'd given her no reason to except being honest. "Fine," she said. 2 o'clock tomorrow." "Good." Nate stood up and offered her his hand. She took it, letting him pull her to her feet, and for just a moment they stood there holding hands like they were sealing a pact that went deeper than words. Then Claire handed him back the teddy bear and walked out of the garage with her heart hammering and her mind racing and the distinct feeling that she'd just agreed to something that would change everything. She just didn't know how yet. Saturday arrived with the kind of gray Seattle morning that made the whole world feel like it was holding its breath. Claire woke at 5:30. Her body clock didn't believe in weekends and spent 3 hours pacing her penthouse trying to convince herself she wasn't nervous about a 2 o'clock appointment with a mechanic. She failed spectacularly. By noon, she'd changed clothes 4 times. The Chanel suit felt too formal. The jeans felt too casual. The dress felt like she was trying too hard. She finally settled on dark slacks and a cashmere sweater that cost more than most people's monthly rent, then immediately second-guessed the choice. "You're being ridiculous," she told her reflection. "It's a mechanic. In a garage. He's probably going to show you how to check your oil or some other mundane thing that normal people know how to do." But the face in the mirror didn't look convinced, and neither was she.
At 1:45, Claire pulled up to Davies Automotive in the back of an Uber. She still didn't have her car, and the loaner the insurance company had offered was a Mercedes sedan that she'd refused on principle. The shop looked closed, which made sense since it was Saturday, but Nate's Honda was parked out front. She paid the driver and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, feeling uncharacteristically uncertain. Through the grimy windows, she couldn't see any movement, couldn't hear any sounds. For a brief, irrational moment, she wondered if this was a setup, if Nate Rhodes was actually the one who'd sabotaged her car, and this whole thing was an elaborate trap. Then the door opened, and he was there, and all her paranoid thoughts evaporated like morning fog. "You came," he said, and he sounded genuinely surprised. "You asked me to." "Yeah, but you're Claire Montgomery. I figured there was a 50-50 chance you'd send an assistant with an excuse about an emergency meeting." "I don't have emergencies on Saturdays." It was a lie, but a small one. Nate smiled, actually smiled, wide and genuine, and it transformed his face completely. "Come on, we're out back." "We?" But he was already walking through the garage, weaving between the silent cars waiting for Monday's repairs. Claire followed, her expensive shoes clicking on concrete that had seen decades of oil stains and dropped tools and the evidence of hard work. The back door led to a small parking lot she hadn't known existed, just a patch of cracked asphalt surrounded by a chain-link fence. In the middle of the lot was a picnic table that looked like it had been rescued from a park somewhere, and sitting at that table was a little girl. Claire stopped walking. The girl was maybe 7 or 8, with dark hair pulled into a slightly crooked ponytail and eyes the same deep brown as Nate's. She wore a purple hoodie with a unicorn on it and pink sneakers that lit up when she kicked her feet against the bench. In front of her was what looked like homework, a workbook and colored pencils scattered across the table's weathered surface. But it was her face that made Claire's chest tighten, pale, almost translucent, with shadows under her eyes that no child should have. The face of someone who'd spent too much time in hospitals, who understood pain and fear in ways that should be reserved for adults. "Stella," Nate said gently, "this is Ms. Montgomery, the one I told you about." The little girl looked up and her eyes went wide. "You're the princess with the magic car." Claire blinked. "I'm the what?" "Daddy said you have a car that's so special only he could fix it, like a magic spell." Stella's voice was soft but clear, with the kind of seriousness that came from children who'd learned to be careful with their words. "That means you must be a princess. Only princesses have magic cars." "Stella has very specific logic," Nate said, and there was so much love in his voice it hurt to hear. "Once she's decided something, there's no arguing with her." "I'm not a princess," Claire said automatically. "That's what a princess would say if she was hiding," Stella countered, then coughed. A wet, rattling sound that made Nate's jaw tighten. He was beside her in an instant, pulling a small medical bag from under the table. He listened to her breathing with a stethoscope that looked well used, checked her pulse, studied her face with the kind of attention Claire had only ever seen in emergency rooms. "Scale of 1 to 10, he asked quietly. 3, Stella said. "Maybe 4. I'm okay, Daddy." "You promised you'd tell me if it got to 5. "It's not 5, I promise." She looked at Claire and smiled, trying to be brave. "I have a broken heart. Not like sad broken. Actually broken. The doctors say it doesn't pump blood right. So sometimes I get tired and cough, and Daddy worries even though I tell him not to." Claire felt something twist in her chest. "That sounds scary." "Sometimes," Stella admitted. "But Daddy says brave people are just scared people who keep going anyway. So I'm being brave." Nate finished his examination and put the stethoscope away, but his hand stayed on Stella's shoulder, a constant point of contact, like he needed to physically feel her there to know she was okay. "Why don't you show Ms. Montgomery what you're working on?" he suggested. Stella brightened immediately. "I'm making a list of the best things in the world. Want to see?" Before Claire could answer, the little girl had pulled her workbook closer and started reading in the careful, deliberate way of children who were still learning that words on paper had sounds attached. "Number 1, Daddy. Number 2, Mr. Patches, that's my bear. Number 3, chocolate ice cream. Number 4, when the rain stops and you can see the sky. Number 5, people who fix broken things." She looked up at Claire. What would be on your list? The question was so simple, so sincere, that Claire found herself speechless. What were the best things in her world? Her company? Her net worth? The view from her penthouse? None of those answers felt right with this child looking at her with eyes that had seen too much and still found joy in chocolate ice cream and clearing skies. I don't know, and Claire admitted quietly. I've never made a list like that. Stella looked genuinely shocked. Never? Never. That's sad. The little girl tilted her head, studying Claire with an intensity that reminded her of Nate. Maybe you should make one. Daddy says making lists helps you remember what matters when you forget. And when do you forget? Claire asked. When I'm in the hospital and I'm scared and everything hurts. Stella's voice didn't waver. I read my list and remember there are good things waiting when I get out. It helps. Claire had negotiated billion-dollar deals. She'd faced down hostile boards and aggressive competitors. She'd built an empire on being harder and colder and more ruthless than anyone expected a woman could be. But this little girl with her broken heart and her list of good things made her feel more vulnerable than she'd felt in 15 years. I think that's very wise, Claire managed. Stella beamed. Daddy says I'm wise too. He says I'm the smartest person he knows. That's because you are, Nate said, ruffling her hair. Then he looked at Claire. Stella, I need to talk to Ms. Montgomery for a few minutes. Grown-up stuff. Can you work on your homework? Is it about who tried to hurt her? Stella asked with the kind of casual directness that made both adults freeze. Stella, I heard you on the phone, Daddy. You said someone sabotaged her car and she could have been hurt bad. She looked at Claire with those two old eyes. That's really mean. Cars are for going places, not for hurting people. Nate crouched down so he was at eye level with his daughter. You're right, it was mean, but Ms. Montgomery is okay, and we're going to make sure she stays okay. Deal? Deal. Stella held out her pinky finger. Nate hooked it with his own, and they shook solemnly, a ritual that clearly had deep history. Then Nate stood and gestured for Claire to follow him to the far side of the parking lot, out of Stella's earshot but still within sight. She noticed he positioned himself so he could see his daughter at all times, like a soldier keeping his back to a wall. I'm sorry, he said when they were far enough away. I probably should have warned you about Stella, but if I'd told you I was bringing my daughter, you wouldn't have come. You're right, Claire admitted. I wouldn't have. I don't do well with children. Why not? Because they're honest. They ask questions nobody wants to answer, and they look at you like you're supposed to have everything figured out. She glanced back at Stella, who was bent over her workbook, tongue poking out in concentration. I don't have anything figured out, Mr. Rhodes. Nate, he corrected. If we're going to work together to figure out who's trying to kill you, you should probably use my first name. Then you should probably stop calling me Ms. Montgomery. What should I call you? Claire. The name felt strange in her mouth, vulnerable, stripped of titles and formality and all the armor she usually wore. Claire, Nate repeated, testing it out. Okay. So Claire, do you know why I asked you here today? To meet your daughter, apparently. Partly, but mostly to show you something. He nodded towards Stella. See how she keeps looking up from her homework? Not at us, at the fence line, the gate, the back door of the shop. Claire watched, and he was right. Every 30 seconds or so, Stella's eyes would flick up, scan her surroundings, then return to her work. She's checking escape routes, Nate said quietly. She's been doing it since she was 5. Every new place we go, she maps out the exits, identifies the safe spaces, plans how to get out if something goes wrong. That's, Claire struggled for the right word. That's heartbreaking. She's a child. She's a child who's coded twice, Nate said, and his voice was very carefully controlled. Once when she was 4, once when she was 6. Both times in hospitals, both times with doctors and nurses and machines designed to keep her alive. And both times, I wasn't there when it happened. Claire heard the guilt in his voice, raw and unhealed. The first time I was at work. Got the call and drove 90 miles an hour to the hospital, ran through the ER like a crazy person, and found her hooked up to machines I couldn't understand with doctors telling me they'd almost lost her. The second time, I was home asleep. She woke up in the middle of the night not breathing right, and by the time I realized something was wrong and called 911, she'd passed out. He rubbed his face, and Claire saw the exhaustion there, not just physical, but soul deep. The exhaustion of someone who'd been fighting a war they couldn't win. After that second time, she started checking exits, started planning, started taking control of the only thing she could control, knowing where to run if she needed to. She was 6 years old, and she'd learned that the world was dangerous and unreliable, and that sometimes the people who were supposed to protect you weren't there when you needed them. "But you were there," Claire said softly. "You got her to the hospital. You saved her." I was almost too late. Nate's jaw tightened, and that almost lives in my head every single day, every time she coughs, every time she gets tired, every time she looks a little too pale. I wonder if this is it, if this is the time I'm too late. Claire understood suddenly why he'd brought her here, why he'd wanted her to meet Stella. This wasn't about the car or the sabotage or the investigation. This was about showing her what fear actually looked like, not boardroom fear or competitive fear or the fear of losing money. This was the fear of losing everything that mattered. "She needs a transplant," Claire said. It wasn't a question. Eventually, her cardiologist says she's stable for now, could be years before she needs one. But stable is relative when you're talking about a kid whose heart is basically held together with hope and medication. He looked back at his daughter, and the love on his face was so fierce it made Claire's chest ache. "I sold everything after her mother died. The house, the retirement accounts, anything I could liquidate. Put it all into a medical fund. But transplants are expensive, and the waiting lists are long, and insurance only covers so much." "That's why you became a mechanic," Claire said, pieces clicking into place. "You needed flexible hours, needed to be able to drop everything if she had an emergency." "I used to design guidance systems for satellites," Nate said, and there was no bitterness in his voice, just statement of fact. "Worked for an aerospace contractor in California. Good money, interesting work, all the prestige you could want. But the hours were brutal, and after Sarah died, after I was alone with Stella and her heart condition, I couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't miss doctor's appointments because of meetings. Couldn't work 80-hour weeks when my daughter needed me home." He shrugged, a gesture that tried to minimize something that must have cost him everything. "So I moved back to Seattle, where I grew up. Took some mechanical courses, turns out electrical engineering translates pretty well to automotive systems, and started fixing cars. Hours are better, pay is worse. But I'm here when Stella needs me, and that's what matters." Claire thought about her own father, a man she'd barely known, who'd chosen his company over his family every time, who'd died of a heart attack in his office at 63, surrounded by contracts instead of people who loved him. She thought about the empire she'd built in his image, the hours she worked, the relationships she'd sacrificed. She thought about what she'd given up to be successful and wondered if she'd been measuring success wrong all along. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. Nate turned to face her fully. "Because you asked me to help you figure out who's trying to kill you, and I will. I'll fix your car. I'll document everything. I'll help you understand the system. But I need you to understand something first." "What?" "Why I'm doing this. Why I'm willing to get involved in something that could be dangerous, that could put me at risk, that could take time away from Stella." His eyes held hers. "It's not for money. It's not for excitement. It's not even because I particularly like you. No offense." "None taken," Claire said dryly. "I'm doing it because Stella checked your exits while we've been talking. She looked at you and sized up whether you were a threat. And then, after she decided you were safe, she went back to her homework." Nate's voice softened. "She's 8 years old, Claire. She shouldn't have to evaluate threats. She shouldn't have to plan escape routes. She should get to be a kid who thinks about chocolate ice cream and lists of good things." "I don't understand what that has to do with—" "It has everything to do with it," Nate interrupted gently. "Because every time someone like you, someone with power and resources and the ability to make a difference, gets hurt by people who think they can get away with it, it makes the world a little more dangerous. For everyone. Including kids like Stella, who are just trying to survive." He looked back at his daughter, and Claire followed his gaze. Stella had abandoned her homework and was now coloring something with deep concentration, her tongue still poking out between her teeth. "I want her to grow up in a world where people who do bad things get caught, Nate continued, where justice exists, where being rich and powerful doesn't mean you're above the law, but it also doesn't mean you're a target for people who want to tear you down. I want her to believe that good people can win, that systems can work, that everything broken can be fixed if you just care enough to try. His voice cracked on the last word, just barely, but Claire heard it. So yeah, he said, I'll help you. Not because you're paying me or because I think you deserve it, but because somebody tried to hurt you. And if we don't figure out who and stop them, they'll just do it again. To you. To someone else. And the world gets a little darker, and my daughter has to check one more exit. Claire stood there in that parking lot with the gray Seattle sky pressing down and a broken-hearted little girl coloring pictures 20 feet away, and felt something fundamental shift inside her. She'd spent 15 years believing that strength meant being untouchable, that success meant needing no one, that power meant building walls high enough that nothing could hurt you. But this man, this mechanic who'd given up everything to save his daughter, who fixed cars for single fathers and taught billionaires about spark plugs, he had more strength than anyone she'd ever met. And it came from exactly the opposite place. It came from caring so much it could destroy you. I'm sorry, Claire said quietly. Nate looked surprised. For what? For being the kind of person who made your daughter check my exits. For living in a world where people try to kill each other over money and power and stupid, meaningless things. For not having a list of good things. She looked at Stella, then back at Nate. For taking so long to realize that maybe I've been fixing the wrong problems. They stood in silence for a moment, and Claire felt the weight of it. All the years of choices that had led to this moment. All the walls she'd built. All the people she'd kept at arm's length. I don't know how to be different, she admitted, and the words cost her everything. Then learn, Nate said, echoing his advice from yesterday. Start small. Make a list. Find one good thing. Just one? It's harder than you think. Claire looked at Stella again, watching the little girl color with complete absorption, and thought about what would be on her list if she made one. The view from her penthouse? That felt hollow. Her company? That felt empty. Her Valkyrie? That had literally tried to kill her. What did she have that was good? What did she have that mattered? The question terrified her because the answer was nothing. Stella, Nate called. Come here for a second. The little girl hopped off the bench and ran over. Actually ran, which seemed impossible for someone with a failing heart. But children defied logic when they wanted to. She stopped in front of them, slightly breathless, looking up with expectant eyes. Ms. Montgomery needs help with something, Nate said. Can you be her helper? What kind of help? Stella asked. Claire crouched down so she was at the girl's eye level, ignoring the voice in her head that said her cashmere sweater would get dirty from the asphalt. Your dad says I should make a list, like yours, of good things, but I don't know where to start. Stella considered this with utmost seriousness. What makes you happy? I don't know. What do you think about when you're sad? Work, mostly. That's not good things. That's distraction things. Stella shook her head like a tiny professor correcting a student. Good things are things that make your heart feel warm, like when Daddy hugs me, or when Mr. Patches smells like home, or when I finish all my medicine and get a sticker from the nurse. I don't think I have things like that, Claire said honestly. Stella's face fell. Everyone has things like that. You just have to look harder. She reached out and took Claire's hand, just grabbed it, like it was the most natural thing in the world, like billionaire CEOs held hands with 8-year-olds all the time. Her hand was small and warm and impossibly fragile. Close your eyes, Stella instructed. What? Close your eyes. I'll help you find something good. Claire looked at Nate, who just shrugged. You made this deal, his expression said. So Claire closed her eyes, feeling ridiculous and vulnerable and strangely hopeful. Think about the last time you felt safe, Stella said softly. Not powerful or successful or important, just safe. Claire's mind spun backward through years of memories. Board meetings where she'd crushed opposition, deals where she'd emerged victorious, moments of triumph and conquest and winning. None of them felt safe. She went further back, past her years as CEO, past business school, past college, searching for a moment when she'd felt truly, genuinely safe. And found one. She was 6 years old, maybe 7. Her mother, dead now for 20 years, was braiding her hair before school. Claire could feel the gentle tug of fingers working through tangles, could smell her mother's perfume, could hear the soft humming of some forgotten song. "I'm going to make sure you're the strongest girl in the whole world," her mother had said. "So strong that nothing can ever hurt you." And Claire had believed her, had felt safe in that belief, in those hands, in that moment before the world taught her that strength meant being alone. "Did you find something?" Stella's voice pulled her back to the present. Claire opened her eyes, and they were wet. When had she started crying? "I found something," she whispered. "Good." Stella squeezed her hand. "That's number 1 on your list. Now you just need to find more." The little girl let go and ran back to her coloring, leaving Claire crouched on the asphalt with tears on her face and Nate looking at her with something that might have been understanding. "She's remarkable," Claire said, standing up and trying to compose herself. "She is," Nate agreed, "and terrifying. She sees things other people miss." "Like her father." "Maybe," Nate smiled slightly. "Or maybe we just both learned to pay attention to what matters instead of what doesn't." They stood there in the gray afternoon light, and Claire felt something settling in her chest. A decision, maybe, or a commitment. She didn't know how to be the person Stella thought she should be, didn't know how to find good things or make lists or believe that the world could be fixed, but she could try. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for trusting me with her." "Don't thank me yet," Nate said. "We still have to figure out who wants you dead." "Right." Claire pulled out her phone and checked the time, nearly 4 o'clock. Where had the last 2 hours gone? "What's the plan?" "I've been thinking about that. The hack on your car was sophisticated, required access to systems that aren't easy to breach. That means either someone very skilled or someone with inside access." "Inside access to what?" "Your life," Nate said bluntly. "Someone who knows your routines, your security protocols, your vehicle information. Someone who could get close enough to plant surveillance software without raising suspicion." Claire's mind immediately went to her employees, hundreds of them, any one of whom might have a grudge or a reason. "That's a lot of people." "Not really. We can narrow it down. Who has access to your car?" "Me. My parking garage attendants. The maintenance company. My driver, but I rarely use him." "Who knows your schedule?" "My assistant, my security team, my executive team." "Who has reason to want you gone?" That question hung in the air like poisoned gas. Claire thought about boardroom enemies and hostile investors and competitors who'd lost deals to her ruthless tactics. She thought about employees she'd fired and companies she'd acquired and stripped for parts. She thought about 15 years of making enemies like other people made friends. "A lot of people," she admitted quietly. "Then we start with the ones who have both motive and opportunity." Nate pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. "Make me a list. Everyone who's had access to your car in the last 3 months and everyone who might want you dead. We'll look for overlap." Claire started naming names and Nate typed them with the efficient precision of someone who'd learned to document everything. The list grew longer than she wanted to admit. Former executives she'd pushed out, competitors she'd destroyed, activists who blamed her company for environmental damage, even a few ex-lovers who'd ended badly. By the time they finished, the sun was starting to set, painting the gray sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed impossible after such a colorless day. "That's 37 people," Nate said, looking at his screen. "That's a lot of suspects." "Welcome to my life." "Yeah." He pocketed his phone. "I can see why someone might want you dead, no offense." "All offense taken," Claire said, but there was no heat in it, just exhaustion. "Daddy," Stella called from the picnic table. "I'm cold." "Okay, baby, we're coming." Nate looked at Claire. "I need to get her home, but I'll work on the car tonight, see if I can find any more evidence of tampering. And you," he pointed at her, "you need to be careful. No patterns, no routines. Mix up your schedule, your routes, everything. Don't tell anyone where you're going before you go. Don't trust anyone completely." "That's already my life," Claire said. "Then trust one person." Nate held her gaze. "Trust me. If something feels wrong, if anything seems suspicious, You call me immediately, day or night. I don't care if it's 3 in the morning and you just have a bad feeling. You call. Why would you do that? Disrupt your life for someone you barely know? Because Stella made you cry, Nate said simply. And the only people who cry when my daughter talks about good things are people who've forgotten what good things feel like. That means you're not too far gone. That means you're worth saving. He walked away before Claire could respond, gathering up Stella and her homework and her colored pencils, loading everything into his arms with practiced efficiency. The little girl waved goodbye over her father's shoulder, and Claire waved back automatically, watching them disappear into the shop. Then she stood alone in that parking lot as the light faded and the temperature dropped and the city started its transformation into night. And she thought about good things. Her mother braiding her hair, a mechanic who saw through her armor, a little girl who thought everyone deserved a list. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Claire pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. At the top of a new page, she typed, "Good things." Then, underneath, 1. My mother's hands in my hair. She stared at it for a long moment, then added, 2. People who fix broken things. It felt inadequate and incomplete and nothing like the comprehensive strategic lists she usually made. But Stella had said to start with one good thing, and Claire had found 2. That had to count for something. She called an Uber and waited in the gathering darkness, and when her phone buzzed with a text from Nate, got her home safe, stay vigilant. N. Claire felt something warm bloom in her chest. Maybe that could be number 3 on her list. People who check on you without being asked. The Uber arrived and she climbed in, giving her address to a driver who didn't recognize her and didn't care. As they pulled away from Davies Automotive, Claire looked back one more time at the small shop with its faded sign and its parking lot full of ordinary cars getting ordinary repairs. She wondered what it would be like to have an ordinary life, to worry about oil changes instead of assassins, to make lists of good things instead of quarterly projections, to hold someone's hand and feel safe instead of powerful. She wondered if it was too late to learn. Her phone buzzed again. A news alert about Montgomery Industries' stock price, something about market fluctuations and investor confidence. Claire dismissed it without reading. For the first time in 15 years, she didn't care. She opened her notes app instead and stared at her list. 2 things. 2 good things in a life that should have had hundreds. By the time the Uber dropped her off at her building, Claire had made a decision. She didn't know who was trying to kill her or why, didn't know if Nate could help her solve it, didn't know if she could become the kind of person who deserved to be saved. But she was going to try. Because somewhere in Seattle, a little girl with a broken heart was coloring pictures and checking exits and believing that good people could win. And Claire Montgomery was tired of being the villain in her own story. She rode the elevator up to her penthouse, unlocked her door, and walked straight to her desk where the old spark plug still sat, worthless metal that Nate had given her as a reminder. Fuel, air, spark, the basic elements of combustion. Claire picked up the spark plug and held it in her palm, feeling its weight, its potential. Then she set it down next to her laptop and got to work. If someone wanted her dead, they'd left traces. They had to have. Digital footprints, paper trails, patterns, in the chaos. She just had to find them. And Claire Montgomery had spent 15 years learning how to find what others tried to hide. Time to put those skills to better use. She worked through the night, cross-referencing employee records with security logs, looking for anomalies in her schedule that someone might have exploited, tracking down the maintenance company's hiring records and insurance claims. She didn't find answers, but she found questions, the right kind of questions, the kind that led somewhere. Who had accessed her parking garage the day before the fire? Why had the maintenance company switched to a new employee 3 weeks ago without notification? Where did that new employee come from, and who recommended them? The questions piled up like kindling, waiting for a spark. And somewhere in the dark city, someone else was awake too, watching, waiting, planning their next move. Because the first attempt had failed, but failure was just information. Next time they'd succeed. They had to. Too much was riding on Claire Montgomery's death for them to stop now. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Claire was still awake, still staring at spreadsheets and security logs that refused to tell her their secrets, when her phone lit up with Nate's number. Her heart jumped before she could stop it. Late-night calls meant emergencies, meant something wrong, meant the kind of news that changed everything. "What happened?" she answered without greeting. I need you to come to the shop. Nate's voice was tight, controlled in the way people got when they were forcing themselves not to panic. Right now. Is Stella... Stella's fine. She's with my neighbor. But Claire, someone broke into the shop tonight. They were looking for something specific. The way he said it made her blood freeze. My car. Your car, he confirmed. They didn't steal anything, didn't vandalize anything else. Just went straight for the Valkyrie. And Claire... He paused, and she heard something in the background that sounded like police radios. They knew exactly what they were looking for. This wasn't random. Claire was already moving, grabbing her coat, her keys, her phone charger. I'm coming. Don't touch anything until I get there. Already gave that speech to the cops. They're not happy about it, but they're waiting. 20 minutes, Claire said, and ran for the elevator. She made it in 15, breaking every traffic law Seattle had and not caring. The shop was lit up like a stage set. Police cars with their lights painting the walls red and blue, crime scene tape across the entrance, uniformed officers taking statements. Claire parked illegally and walked straight through the perimeter like she owned it, which in a sense she did. Money bought you the ability to ignore barriers that stopped other people. Nate was standing near the open bay door talking to a detective who looked tired and underpaid. When he saw Claire, something in his face relaxed fractionally. Ms. Montgomery, the detective said, flipping open a notebook. I'm Detective Sarah Chen. I understand this is your vehicle that was targeted? It is. Claire looked past her into the bay, where her Valkyrie sat under harsh fluorescent lights surrounded by evidence markers. From here, it looked undamaged. What did they do? That's what we're trying to determine. Mr. Rhodes here seems to think you can help us understand what they were after. Can I see it? Detective Chen hesitated, then nodded. Don't touch anything, and stay behind the tape. Claire walked into the bay with Nate beside her, and immediately saw what he'd meant. The car itself looked fine, no broken windows, no visible damage. But the area around it was chaos. Tools scattered across the floor, diagnostic equipment pulled away from the walls. The laptop Nate had been using was on the ground, its screen cracked. They came in through the back door, Nate said quietly. Cut the lock. Ignored 7 other cars, including a Porsche and a Ferrari, and went straight for yours. They pulled up the diagnostic logs, accessed the computer system, and tried to download something from the vehicle's memory. Tried? I installed a secondary security protocol after I found the spyware. Anyone trying to access the system without the right credentials gets locked out after 3 attempts. They tried 4 times, which triggered an alarm that called my phone and the police automatically. Claire looked at him, seeing him fully for the first time tonight. He was wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that said, I void warranties, with grease stains that were probably permanent. His hair was standing up in all directions, and he had the wired alertness of someone running on adrenaline and fear. You installed a security system on my car without telling me? I installed a security system on your car to keep someone from finishing what they started, Nate corrected. And good thing I did, or they'd have everything they needed by now. Everything they needed for what? To erase their tracks, to remove the evidence of the original hack, to make it look like the fire was just an accident so nobody would investigate further. He gestured at the scattered equipment. They were cleaning up, Claire, which means whatever they're planning, they're not done yet. Detective Chen had followed them into the bay and was listening with professional interest. Mr. Rhodes, you mentioned finding spyware in the vehicle's system. Do you still have evidence of that? I do. It's backed up on 3 separate drives in 3 separate locations. Nate pulled out his phone and opened a folder full of screenshots and diagnostic logs. I can provide copies, but I'll need them returned. This is evidence of multiple felonies: hacking, stalking, attempted murder. Alleged attempted murder, Detective Chen corrected automatically. There's nothing alleged about wires that were deliberately stripped and twisted together to cause a short circuit that would start a fire, Nate said, and there was steel in his voice now. I've been documenting everything, every piece of evidence, every modification, every trace of the original hack, and I'm telling you, Detective, someone is trying very hard to kill Miss Montgomery, and they're not going to stop just because they failed once. Chen looked at Claire with new interest. Ms. Montgomery, do you have any idea who might want to harm you? Claire thought about the list she and Nate had made, 37 names long and growing. Several ideas, none I can prove.
Then we'll need to start investigating all of them. I'll need you to come to the station tomorrow and give a full statement. Chen closed her notebook. In the meantime, Mr. Rhodes, we're going to need to process this scene. That means your shop is closed until we're finished. How long?
Could it be a day? Could be 3? Depends on what we find. Nate's jaw tightened, but he nodded. I'll call my customers, reschedule their appointments. And Ms. Montgomery, Chen turned to Claire, I strongly suggest you increase your personal security. If Mr. Rhodes is right and someone's actively targeting you, you need protection. I have security. You need more, Chen said bluntly. These people broke into a commercial building with an alarm system. They're not amateurs. They're not going to be deterred by a building security guard and a doorman. Claire wanted to argue, wanted to insist she could handle herself, wanted to maintain the illusion of control. But standing in this crime scene, looking at her car that had been violated for the second time, she couldn't deny the detective was right. I'll make arrangements, she said quietly. Chen nodded and walked away to coordinate with the other officers, leaving Claire and Nate standing by the Valkyrie like parents by a sick child's bedside. I'm sorry, Nate said after a moment. For what? You didn't break in. For not anticipating this. For not realizing they'd come back. He rubbed his face, exhaustion and frustration bleeding through. I should have known that finding the spyware would make them desperate. Should have moved the car somewhere safer, installed better security, something. You did install better security. You stopped them from getting what they wanted. Claire looked at him, at this man who'd given up sleep to protect her property, who'd built fail-safes into her car without being asked. You probably just saved my life, Nate. Maybe. Or maybe I just delayed the inevitable. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. He gestured at the car, at the crime scene, at the evidence of someone's determination. Whoever's doing this has resources. They have skills, they have motivation, and we still don't know who they are or what they want or how to stop them. So yeah, maybe I stopped them tonight. But what about tomorrow night? Or next week? How long can we keep this up before they find a way through? Claire heard the fear in his voice, not for himself, but for her. And underneath that fear was something else, something that made her chest tight. He cared. This man who'd met her 3 weeks ago, who owed her nothing, who had every reason to walk away from the mess her life had become. He cared whether she lived or died. Not because she paid him or because she could do something for him, but because somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being a client and become a person he wanted to protect. Then we figure it out faster, Claire said firmly. We go through that list, we investigate every name, we find whoever's doing this before they can try again. Claire, that's going to take weeks, maybe months, and you don't have that kind of time. Then what do you suggest? That I hide? That I give up my company, my life, everything I've built, because someone wants me dead? Her voice rose despite her best efforts to stay calm. I won't do that, Nate. I won't let them win. It's not about winning or losing. It's always about winning or losing, Claire snapped. That's the only language my world speaks. You win or you lose. You survive or you don't. You're the predator or you're prey. And I have spent 15 years refusing to be prey for anyone. Even if it kills you? Even then. They stared at each other in the harsh light of the shop, and Claire saw him struggling with something, frustration, maybe, or the desire to shake sense into her. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. You know what the difference is between you and your car? He asked. What? Your car I can fix. I can rebuild it, replace parts, make it better than new. But you? He shook his head. You only get one life, Claire. One chance. And if someone takes that from you, there's no repair, no replacement, no second try. You're just gone. The words hit harder than any accusation. Claire felt them lodge somewhere deep in her chest, in the place where she'd locked away all the fears she refused to acknowledge. I know that, she whispered. Do you? Because you're standing here arguing about winning like this is a business negotiation instead of your life. Nate took a step closer. I've watched my daughter code twice. I've held her hand while doctors tried to restart her heart. I've sat in waiting rooms at 3 a.m. wondering if she'd see sunrise. And you know what I learned? What? That life doesn't care about winning. It doesn't care about being strong or being right or refusing to back down. It just cares about whether you're still breathing at the end. His voice cracked slightly. And I'm trying really hard to make sure you're still breathing, Claire, but I can't do it alone. I need you to care about staying alive, as much as you care about not losing. Claire felt tears prick her eyes for the second time in 2 days, a record she hadn't approached in years. I don't know how, she admitted. I don't know how to be someone who runs from fights. Then don't run. But don't stand still and make yourself an easy target either. Nate pulled out his phone again, scrolling through something. I've been thinking about this, about who had the knowledge and access to pull off both the original sabotage and tonight's break-in. And I keep coming back to the same question. What question? Who profits from your death? Claire laughed bitterly. Lots of people. My competitors, hostile shareholders who want to break up the company and sell it for parts, environmental groups who blame Montgomery Industries for pollution. Take your pick. But who profits immediately? Who gets something tangible the moment you're gone? The question hung in the air, and Claire's mind started working through the possibilities. Her company had succession plans. If she died, control would pass to her executive board until they could appoint a new CEO. Her personal wealth would go to various charities per her will. Her shares in Montgomery Industries would be distributed according to carefully drafted legal documents. My COO, she said slowly. Marcus Webb. He's next in line for CEO if I'm gone. He's been pushing for more control, arguing that I'm too aggressive, that the board needs to rein me in. Does he have technical knowledge? Background in engineering or computers? No, he's finance. MBA from Wharton, worked his way up through acquisitions. Then he'd need help, someone with the skills to hack your car. Claire thought about Marcus's team, his inner circle, the people he'd brought with him when she'd promoted him 3 years ago. His chief of staff used to work in IT security. Before that, he was at a defense contractor doing cyber work. Nate's eyes sharpened. Name? David something, David Chang? Claire pulled out her phone and scrolled through her company directory. David Chang, age 32, MIT graduate, worked at Lockheed Martin for 5 years before joining Montgomery Industries. Does he have access to your schedule? Through Marcus, yes. The executive team has visibility into my calendar for coordination purposes. What about your parking garage? Claire thought back through the access logs she'd been reviewing. I'd have to check, but probably. Executive staff get parking privileges, and Marcus has been to my building dozens of times for meetings. Nate was typing rapidly on his phone, making notes, building a case. Okay, so we have motive. Marcus wants your job. We have opportunity. David has the skills and the access. What we need now is evidence. How do we get that? We make them panic. Nate looked up from his phone, and there was something calculating in his expression that reminded Claire he'd spent years solving complex problems. They broke in tonight because they needed to cover their tracks. That means they're worried. They think I found something that can identify them. If we let them believe that's true, that I'm close to proving who did it, they might make a mistake. Or they might try to kill me faster. That's why you're going to disappear. Claire stared at him. Excuse me? Not literally, but you need to be unpredictable. Change hotels every night. Use cash. Don't tell anyone where you're staying. Make it impossible for them to track you while we investigate. Nate's voice was firm, but not unkind. I know it's not how you want to live. I know it feels like losing. But it's not losing, Claire. It's surviving long enough to win. Every instinct Claire had screamed against this plan. She didn't run. She didn't hide. She faced problems head-on and crushed them with superior force and resources. But looking at Nate's exhausted face, thinking about Stella checking exits and making lists of good things, remembering Detective Chen's warning about these people not being amateurs, Claire realized that maybe her instincts were wrong. Maybe survival wasn't about being the strongest or the most aggressive. Maybe it was about being smart enough to know when to change tactics. Okay, she said quietly. I'll disappear, but only if you help me. Help you how? Be my contact, my safe person. You're the only one I trust right now, Nate. Everyone else could be compromised, could be working with Marcus, could be feeding him information. She hated how vulnerable her voice sounded. I need someone I can call, someone who'll answer. Claire, I have Stella. I can't just drop everything to... I'm not asking you to drop everything. I'm asking you to answer your phone, to be there if I need help, to... She stopped, struggling with words that had never come easily. To care whether I make it through this. Nate looked at her for a long moment, and Claire saw the war happening behind his eyes. He had a daughter who needed him, a life that was already complicated, every reason to say no. Okay, he said finally, but you have to promise me something. What? That you'll actually let me help. No pride, no stubbornness, no, I can handle this myself. If I tell you to hide, you hide. If I tell you to run, you run. If I tell you that you're in danger, you listen. His voice was hard now, almost angry, because I can't help you if you won't help yourself. And I won't watch another person I care about die because they were too proud to ask for help when they needed it. The words another person hung in the air between them. His wife, Claire realized. He'd lost his wife, and somehow Claire had become someone he didn't want to lose too. I promise, she said, and meant it. Detective Chen emerged from the back room, snapping off latex gloves. We're done here for tonight. Mr. Rhodes, you can lock up what's left. We'll be back tomorrow to finish processing. What about my car? Claire asked. It stays here for now. It's evidence. Chen looked between them, seeing something Claire wasn't sure they were ready to name. Ms. Montgomery, one more thing. This investigation is going to take time. In my experience, people who try to kill you once usually try again. Be careful who you trust. I am, Claire said, looking at Nate. Chen nodded and walked out, leaving them alone in the aftermath of chaos. Other officers followed, their radios crackling with dispatcher codes and routine violence. Within minutes, the shop was empty except for the two of them and a car that had become the center of everything. I need to get back to Stella, Nate said. Mrs. Rodriguez next door is great, but Stella gets anxious if I'm gone too long. Of course, go. Where are you going? Claire thought about her penthouse with its electronic locks and security cameras that clearly weren't enough. I don't know. A hotel, maybe. Use cash, don't use your name. Don't tell anyone which one. Nate pulled out a pen and wrote something on a business card. This is my personal cell, not the shop number. My actual phone, it's always on. Always within reach. You need anything, anytime, you call. Claire took the card, feeling the weight of the trust it represented. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We haven't caught them. Nate looked at his shop, his livelihood, now a crime scene, and sighed. But we will. I promise you that, Claire. We'll figure out who's doing this, and we'll stop them. How can you be so sure? Because the alternative is unacceptable. He said it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. And I stopped accepting unacceptable outcomes the day my daughter was born. He walked her to her car, not the Valkyrie, but the loaner Mercedes she'd finally accepted from insurance, and waited while she got in and started the engine. Through the window, she watched him check the street in both directions, scanning for threats with the same systematic attention he gave to engines. Nate, she called before he could walk away. Yeah? Add something to your daughter's list for me. What? People who keep their promises. Tell her that's a good thing, a really good thing. Nate smiled, tired but genuine. I will. Now go. Find somewhere safe. And Claire? Don't forget to actually sleep. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. Claire drove away from Davies Automotive at 3:47 in the morning, watching Nate in her rearview mirror until she turned the corner and he disappeared. Then she drove aimlessly through Seattle's empty streets, thinking about good things and bad people, and the strange mechanic who'd somehow become the anchor, keeping her from drifting away completely. She ended up at a small hotel near the university, the kind of place that catered to visiting professors and graduate students, where people paid in cash and minded their own business. The night clerk barely looked at her when she registered under a fake name, just took her money and handed over a key card. The room was small and anonymous, beige walls, generic art, furniture that had seen better decades. Nothing like her penthouse with its custom everything and its view that cost more per month than most people's annual salary. But it was safe. Or safe enough. Claire lay on the bed fully clothed, too wired to sleep, and pulled out her phone. She opened her notes app and looked at her list of good things. 2 items. Just 2. She added a third. People who answer their phone at 2 a.m. Then she stared at the ceiling and thought about Marcus Webb and David Chang and 35 other people who might want her dead. She thought about patterns and opportunities and the way puzzle pieces clicked together when you finally saw the right configuration. And slowly, despite her best efforts to stay vigilant, exhaustion pulled her under. She dreamed of car engines and little girls with broken hearts and hands braiding hair while humming forgotten songs. She dreamed of spark plugs and security systems and a man who fixed broken things. She dreamed of being safe. Across the city, Nate let himself into his small rental house and found Mrs. Rodriguez asleep on the couch, with Netflix still playing. He woke her gently, thanked her, paid her double because it was 4 a.m, and locked the door behind her with 3 separate locks. Then he checked on Stella. She was asleep in her bed, Mr. Patches clutched to her chest, breathing steady and even. The monitors he kept by her bedside showed normal heart rate, normal oxygen levels, normal everything. But Nate stood there watching her breathe anyway, the way he did every night, counting each rise and fall of her chest like they were victories. "Hey, baby," he whispered, even though she was asleep. "Daddy's home. Everything's okay." Stella stirred slightly, mumbling something that might have been his name, then settled back into sleep. Nate pulled out his phone and looked at the photos he'd taken of Claire's car, of the break-in evidence, of the diagnostic logs that showed exactly how someone had hacked the system. He thought about Marcus Webb and David Chang and the way certain pieces of this puzzle fit together too perfectly to be coincidence. Tomorrow he'd start digging deeper. Tomorrow he'd find proof. Tonight, he'd just stand here watching his daughter breathe and thinking about another woman who needed protecting, who'd looked at him with tears in her eyes and asked him to care whether she survived. As if he had a choice. As if his heart made decisions based on logic instead of need. "I'm keeping her alive, Sarah," he whispered to his dead wife, to the memory of the woman who'd made him promise to always do the right thing even when it was hard. "I'm keeping them both alive. I don't know how yet, but I will." Stella coughed once in her sleep, and Nate's hand went automatically to her wrist, checking her pulse, feeling for irregularities. Normal. Everything normal. He kissed her forehead and went to his own room where he sat on the bed and stared at his phone and thought about calling Claire just to make sure she'd found somewhere safe. He didn't. She needed rest. They both did. But he kept his phone on the nightstand, volume turned all the way up, ready to answer if she called. Because some promises were too important to break, and some people were too important to lose. Even if they'd only been in your life for 3 weeks, even if you barely knew them, even if saving them might cost you everything you had left. The city slept around them, perpetrator and victim, hunter and hunted, all resting before the next round began. And in the space between darkness and dawn, in hotel rooms and small houses and probably some expensive office where someone plotted murder, the pieces continued to move. The game was far from over, but for tonight, everyone was still breathing. And that, Nate had learned, was sometimes the only victory that mattered. Claire woke to her phone buzzing at 6:30, her body stiff from sleeping in clothes on a mattress that felt like it had been manufactured during the Cold War. For a disoriented moment, she didn't remember where she was. The beige walls and generic lamp could have been any hotel in any city. Then memory crashed back. The break-in, the evidence, Marcus and David, her promise to disappear. The phone said unknown number, but Claire answered anyway. Maybe that was stupid. Maybe it was dangerous. But hiding in hotel rooms forever wasn't a plan. It was just postponing the inevitable. "Miss Montgomery, it's Detective Chen. I'm calling with an update." Claire sat up, suddenly alert. "What kind of update?" "The kind you're not going to like. We ran the security footage from your building's parking garage for the past 3 months like you requested. Found something interesting on the day before your car caught fire." "What?" "Your maintenance contractor, the one who does routine checks on executive vehicles, sent a different technician than usual. Guy named James Peterson. He was in the garage for 43 minutes, most of that time spent on your vehicle." Claire's heart started hammering. And James Peterson doesn't exist. The name, the license, the employment records, all fake. Someone created a convincing enough identity to pass the building's background check, but it falls apart under real scrutiny. Chen's voice was grim. Ms. Montgomery, someone inserted a plant into your building's security system specifically to access your car. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Can you trace who created the fake identity? We're working on it, but these things take time. What I can tell you is that whoever did this has resources and knowledge. They knew your building's security protocols, knew how the maintenance company operated, knew exactly how to blend in. Chen paused. Do you have somewhere safe to stay? Yes. Good. Stay there. Don't go to your office. Don't follow any predictable patterns. We're treating this as an active threat now, which means we're allocating more resources, but it also means you need to take this seriously. I am taking it seriously, Detective. Then act like it. I've seen too many people think they're untouchable right up until they're not. Chen's voice softened slightly. I don't want to be writing a report about your death, Ms. Montgomery. So please, for once in your high-powered life, let other people protect you. The call ended, leaving Claire sitting on the edge of a sagging hotel bed, feeling more vulnerable than she had since she was 22, and broke and fighting her way into business school. She called Nate before she could second-guess herself. He answered on the first ring. You okay? Detective Chen just called. The maintenance worker who accessed my car the day before the fire was a plant. Fake identity, fake credentials, the whole thing. She heard Nate exhale sharply. That confirms it wasn't random. This was coordinated. By Marcus and David, you think? Maybe. Probably. But we need proof. There was rustling on his end, fabric, movement, the sounds of morning routine. I've been going through the diagnostic logs again. Found something I missed before. What? The spyware that was installed on your car. It wasn't just tracking your location. It was also transmitting data to a remote server. Every trip you took, every destination, every person you met if they were in the car with you. Basically, a complete surveillance package. Claire felt cold. Can you trace where it was transmitting to? Already did. Took me most of the night, but I followed the data trail through 3 proxy servers to a server farm in Nevada. And guess who has a contract with that server farm? Tell me. Montgomery Industries, specifically your IT department, which means whoever set this up had internal access to your company's infrastructure. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. David Chang had worked in IT security. David Chang was Marcus's chief of staff. David Chang had the skills, the access, the motivation. We need to confront them, Claire said. No. Nate's voice was firm. We need evidence that will hold up in court. Right now, all we have is circumstantial connections and digital trails that a good lawyer could argue are coincidental. We need them to make a mistake. How? I have an idea, but you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway. There was a pause, and Claire could picture him weighing his words, trying to find the right way to say something dangerous. We set a trap. We let Marcus think he's won, that you're scared, hiding, vulnerable. Then we give him an opportunity to finish what he started, and when he takes it, we catch him in the act. You want to use me as bait. I want to use your car as bait, Nate corrected. The Valkyrie is still at my shop, still evidence, still the key to everything. What if word gets out that I've found definitive proof of who sabotaged it, that I've traced the hack all the way back to the source, and I'm planning to give that evidence to the police? Claire saw where he was going. Marcus panics, sends David to destroy the evidence, or comes himself. Either way, we'll be waiting, with cameras, with witnesses, with Detective Chen ready to make arrests. Nate's voice was steady, but she could hear the underlying tension. It's risky. If they're smart enough, they'll see through it. But people who think they're about to get caught tend to make desperate choices. And desperate people make mistakes. Exactly. Claire thought about it, weighing the risks against the alternative of spending the rest of her life looking over her shoulder. Okay, let's do it. What do you need from me? Stay hidden, stay safe, and trust me. He paused. Can you do that, Claire? Actually trust me to handle this? It was the hardest question anyone had asked her in years. Trusting people meant vulnerability. It meant giving up control. It meant accepting that you couldn't solve every problem with money and willpower, and refusing to show weakness. But she'd promised. She'd promised to let him help. I trust you, she said quietly, and meant it more than she'd meant anything in a long time. Good. I'll call you when it's done. Nate? Yeah? Be careful. If I'm right about Marcus, he's not going to just give up. He's wanted my job for 3 years. He's not going to let a mechanic stand between him and a CEO position. I'm not just a mechanic, Claire. I used to design systems that put satellites in orbit. I think I can handle one ambitious executive. There was something in his voice, confidence mixed with determination, that made Claire believe him. She ended the call and sat in her anonymous hotel room, feeling helpless and hating it. This was her fight, her company, her would-be killer. And she was hiding in a hotel while someone else fought her battles. But maybe that was okay. Maybe strength wasn't always about fighting alone. Maybe sometimes it was about knowing when to let other people help. She pulled out her phone and opened her notes app. Her list of good things stared back at her, 3 items that felt inadequate and incomplete. She added a 4th, people who design traps to catch bad guys. Then she waited. Across the city, Nate was already setting things in motion. He called Detective Chen first, explained his plan, got her reluctant agreement to provide backup and surveillance. Then he called Jack Davies and asked him to spread the word at every mechanic shop and auto body place in Seattle that Nate Rhodes had cracked the Montgomery case wide open, that he had proof of corporate sabotage, that arrests were imminent. In a community as tight as Seattle's automotive repair scene, gossip traveled faster than electricity. By noon, everyone knew. By 2 o'clock, the story had reached the business district. By 4 o'clock, Marcus Webb was making phone calls. Nate spent the afternoon preparing. He moved Stella to Mrs. Rodriguez's house with strict instructions not to let anyone in, not to answer questions, to call 911 if anything felt wrong. He kissed his daughter goodbye and promised he'd be back before bedtime, ignoring the fear in her eyes that said she didn't quite believe him. Then he went back to the shop and waited. Detective Chen had positioned plainclothes officers at strategic points, one in the Vietnamese restaurant next door, one in a car down the street, one actually inside the shop pretending to be a customer picking up a vehicle. Cameras were hidden in the rafters, recording everything. The trap was set. All they needed was for someone to walk into it. Night fell. The other mechanics went home. The neighborhood settled into its evening rhythm. Families eating dinner, kids doing homework. The mundane machinery of normal life that Nate had sacrificed his career to preserve for Stella. At 8:17, the back door's lock clicked. Nate was in the office reviewing footage on his laptop, but he heard it clearly through the audio feed from the cameras they'd installed. He watched the screen as a figure slipped through the door, tall, athletic build, moving with the confidence of someone who'd done this before. David Chang. Nate felt vindication and anger in equal measure. He'd been right. They'd been right. This was the man who'd hacked Claire's car, who'd planted the spyware, who'd tried to make it look like an accident. David went straight for the Valkyrie, pulling out a laptop and connecting it to the car's diagnostic port with practiced efficiency. He worked quickly, his fingers flying over the keyboard, probably trying to wipe the evidence, to erase the digital trail that led back to Marcus Webb. Nate waited, watching on camera, letting David incriminate himself thoroughly. The plainclothes officers waited too, poised but patient. They needed this to be airtight. Then the front door opened. Nate's head snapped up. That wasn't part of the plan. The front was supposed to be locked, secure, the only entry point the back door that David had just used. Marcus Webb walked into the shop like he owned it. "David," Marcus called out, his voice carrying through the empty bay. "How much longer?" Nate watched on camera as David looked up, startled. "I told you to stay away. If this goes wrong, it's not going wrong. It's taking too long." Marcus walked toward the Valkyrie, and even through the grainy camera footage, Nate could see the cold calculation on his face. How hard is it to delete some files? It's not just files. Rhodes backed up everything. The server logs, the diagnostic history, the trace routes. He built a case. David's voice was stressed, scared. "We should cut our losses, leave the country. The data trail leads right to us." The data trail leads to nothing without the physical evidence, and once we destroy that, Marcus gestured at the Valkyrie, "it's just a mechanic's word against ours. Who do you think the board will believe?" "Marcus, this is insane. We already tried to kill her twice. How many more times before we succeed?" Marcus pulled something from his coat pocket. In the dim light, it took Nate a moment to recognize it. A gun. Everything changed in that instant.
This wasn't just corporate espionage anymore. This wasn't just attempted murder by sabotage. This was Marcus Webb standing in Nate's shop with a weapon, willing to eliminate anyone who stood between him and what he wanted. Detective Chen's voice crackled in Nate's earpiece. "All units, suspect is armed. Move in carefully. Rhodes, stay where you are." But Nate was already moving. He couldn't explain it rationally. The smart thing was to stay hidden, let the police handle it, avoid confrontation with an armed man who'd already proven he was willing to kill. But something about Marcus standing there with a gun in the shop where Nate had worked for 2 years, threatening the fragile safety he'd built for Stella, flipped a switch in his brain. This was his space, his territory, and he was done letting dangerous people make the rules. He walked out of the office and into the service bay, making no effort to hide his footsteps. Marcus and David both spun toward him, and Nate saw David's face go white with shock, while Marcus's expression hardened into something cold and determined. "Mr. Rhodes," Marcus said, and the gun stayed pointed at the ground, but his hand was steady. "I was hoping we wouldn't have to involve you directly." "Yeah, well, I tend to get involved when people break into my shop." Nate kept his voice calm, conversational, like they were discussing the weather instead of murder. "Twice in 1 week. You're persistent, I'll give you that." "It's not personal. You're just collateral damage." "Funny, it feels pretty personal from where I'm standing." Nate took another step forward, and he saw David's eyes flick toward the back door, calculating escape routes the way Stella did. "What's the plan here, Marcus? Shoot me? Destroy the evidence? Pin everything on David?" Marcus smiled, and it was the coldest thing Nate had ever seen. "Something like that. David here has been unstable lately, obsessed with Miss Montgomery. When the police investigate, they'll find his history of stalking, his unauthorized access to company systems, a disturbed employee acting alone. Tragic, really." "You son of a..." David started, but Marcus cut him off. "You should have been more careful with your digital footprint, David. Should have used better proxies. Should have covered your tracks." Marcus's voice was almost gentle, like he was explaining to a child why their mistake was fatal. "But you didn't, and now you're a liability." The gun came up, but not toward Nate, toward David. Everything happened in a fraction of a second. David lunged sideways. Marcus fired. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off concrete and metal. And Nate moved without thinking, without planning, driven by the same instinct that made him check Stella's breathing every night. He hit Marcus from the side just as the second shot rang out, knocking him off balance. The gun skittered across the floor. David was on the ground, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers, but alive. The first shot had missed. The second had winged him. Nate and Marcus struggled for a moment, grappling like children on a playground, except one of them was fighting for their life, and the other was fighting to become CEO. Marcus was strong, desperate, fueled by 3 years of ambition and the certainty that he was entitled to Claire's position. But Nate had spent those same 3 years lifting daughters and moving engines and staying awake through nightmares. He had the kind of strength that came from necessity rather than gyms, from love rather than ambition. He pinned Marcus to the floor just as the police burst through both doors, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Detective Chen was there, professional and efficient, taking control of the scene. Officers cuffed Marcus, attended to David's wound, secured the weapon. Through it all, Nate just sat on the concrete, breathing hard, his hands shaking with adrenaline, thinking about how close he'd come to being shot, to dying, to leaving Stella alone. "You okay?" Detective Chen crouched beside him, her professional mask slipping to show genuine concern. Yeah, I'm okay." Nate's voice shook. "David needs an ambulance." "Already called. EMTs are 2 minutes out." Chen looked at the scene, the blood on the floor, the gun in an evidence bag, Marcus Webb handcuffed and silent, and shook her head. "That was incredibly stupid, Rhodes. You could have been killed." "I know." "Then why did you do it?" Nate thought about Stella and her lists, about Claire and her broken spark plug, about his dead wife's voice telling him to always do the right thing. "Because someone had to, and I was here." Chen studied him for a moment, then nodded like that explanation made sense. Maybe in her world it did. "We'll need your statement. Full deposition of everything that happened." "Can I make a phone call first?" "Make it quick." Nate pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and called Claire. She answered before the first ring finished, her voice tight with stress.
Tell me you're okay. I'm okay. It's over. They came, both of them. Marcus had a gun. Police arrested them both. He heard her exhale, long and shaky. You're sure you're okay? You're not hurt? I'm fine. Little shaken up, but fine. Nate looked at the blood on the floor. David's blood. Could have been his blood. And felt the weight of what had almost happened. Claire, I need you to do something for me. Anything. Come to the shop. Not right now. Wait until I text you that it's clear. But come. There's something I need to give you. What? You'll see. He ended the call and spent the next 2 hours giving his statement to Detective Chen, watching paramedics take David Chang away, observing Marcus Webb sit in a police car with his perfect suit and his ruined ambitions. The shop became a crime scene for the second time in a week, but this time there was closure instead of questions. By midnight, the police were finished. By 12:30, Nate had cleaned the blood off his floor and opened the bay doors to let fresh air chase away the smell of gun smoke and fear. By 1 o'clock, he texted Claire that it was safe. She arrived 20 minutes later in the Mercedes loaner, looking like she hadn't slept in days, but still somehow elegant in jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than his mortgage. She walked into the shop and stopped, just looking at him, and Nate saw everything in her face. Relief and fear and gratitude, and something else he didn't have a name for. Nate, she started, but he held up a hand. Before you say anything, I need to show you something. He led her to the Valkyrie, which sat in the middle of the bay under bright lights, looking none the worse for being at the center of a murder conspiracy. Nate opened the hood and reached into the engine bay, carefully extracting something he'd hidden there earlier. It was a box, small, wooden, hand-carved with surprising skill. What is this, what? Claire asked. Open it. She did, and inside were 6 items. The original spark plug he'd given her, a photograph of Stella holding Mr. Patches, a small notebook with good things written on the cover, a key, a folded piece of paper, and a ring of gears welded together into an art piece. I don't understand, Claire said quietly. The spark plug you already know about. Fuel, air, spark. The elements of combustion and life. Nate pointed to each item as he explained. The photo is Stella. She wanted you to have it, said you needed a reminder of people who think you're brave. The notebook is for your list. She said 3 things aren't enough. You need at least 20 to have a proper list. Claire picked up the notebook with trembling fingers. The key is to the shop. Jack's retiring next year, and he asked if I wanted to buy the place. I said I couldn't afford it. Then I realized maybe I didn't have to do it alone. Nate met her eyes. I'm not asking for your money, Claire. I'm asking if you'd want to be a partner. You've got business skills I'll never have. I've got technical knowledge you'll never need. Together we could build something that matters. A repair shop? A second chance shop. A place where people who've been broken down get fixed. Where single parents can get their cars repaired for what they can afford. Where kids like Stella learn that the world has good things in it. His voice was steady despite his racing heart. You said you didn't know how to be different. This is how. We fix things together. Claire stared at the key like it was a foreign object. Why would you want me as a partner? I'm the Ice Queen, the Barracuda. I destroy things, Nate. I don't build them. You destroyed the people trying to kill you. You built a fortune from nothing. You survived 15 years in a world that tried to break you. Nate touched her hand gently. You're not ice, Claire. You're just someone who forgot how to melt. But I've seen you with Stella. I've seen you cry. I've seen you trust me when every instinct you had said not to. That's not ice. That's courage. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. What's the paper? Read it. Claire unfolded it with shaking hands. It was a list, written in a child's careful handwriting. Things Miss Montgomery is good at. 1. Being brave even when she's scared. 2. Having a really cool car. 3. Listening when Daddy talks. 4. Making lists even though she doesn't know how. 5. Being a princess even though she says she's not. Claire laughed through her tears. She really thinks I'm a princess. She thinks you're someone worth saving, and she's usually right about these things. Nate picked up the last item, the ring of gears. This is from me. I made it last week.
before everything went crazy. It's supposed to be a promise. What kind of promise? That broken things can be beautiful. That what's damaged can still function. That sometimes the most important repairs are the ones that don't fix what's broken. They just make it strong enough to keep going anyway. He placed the gear ring in her palm. You don't have to change who you are, Claire. You just have to let someone help you carry the weight. They stood there in the quiet shop with a car that had survived sabotage, and a box full of meaning, and 15 years of armor cracking open to let light through. Claire looked at Nate Rhodes, this mechanic who'd saved her life twice, who'd seen her at her worst and somehow found her worth protecting, who'd given up satellites for daughter and was offering to give up more for her. I don't know how to be someone's partner, she whispered, in business or otherwise. I don't know how to share control or trust decisions to other people. I don't know how to be anything but alone. Then learn. Nate smiled. Start with the shop. Start with being co-owner of a place that fixes cars and people. Start with having coffee with me and Stella on Sunday mornings. Start with adding things to your list until it's longer than you can count. He took her hand. Start with not being alone anymore. Claire Montgomery, CEO, billionaire, the Ice Queen herself, looked at this man who'd somehow become essential in 3 weeks, at the box full of gifts that said you matter, at a future that involved fixing trucks for single fathers instead of crushing competitors. And she said yes. Not to everything, not all at once, not without fear, but yes to trying, yes to being someone different, yes to good things and second chances, and the terrifying possibility that maybe strength came from connection rather than isolation. They stood there until dawn broke over Seattle, talking about plans for the shop, about what Claire would do with Montgomery Industries now that Marcus was arrested, about how Stella would react to having Claire around more often. They talked about therapy, both of them needed it, and about lawyers to handle the partnership paperwork, and about whether it was possible to repair 15 years of damage with patience and time. I should go, Claire said finally. You need to pick up Stella, and I need to figure out how to explain to my board that I'm buying a repair shop. You don't have to explain anything to anyone, Nate said. It's your life, Claire. You get to decide what matters. She kissed him then, quick and gentle, barely a brush of lips, more question than answer. But Nate kissed her back, and in that moment, Claire felt something she hadn't felt in 15 years. Safe. Not powerful, not successful, not untouchable, just safe. She drove back to her penthouse as the city woke up, and instead of immediately diving into damage control and crisis management, she sat at her desk and opened the notebook Stella had given her. She turned to the first page where the little girl had written in careful letters, Ms. Montgomery's list of good things. Claire picked up a pen and started writing. 1. My mother's hands braiding my hair. 2. People who fix broken things. 3. People who answer their phone at 2 a.m. 4. Little girls who think everyone deserves a list. 5. Mechanics who design traps to catch bad guys. 6. The possibility of not being alone anymore. She filled 3 pages before she stopped, amazed at how many good things existed when you actually looked for them. Her apartment didn't feel quite so empty. Her view didn't feel quite so isolated. Her life didn't feel quite so hollow. That afternoon, she called an emergency board meeting and announced she was taking a step back from day-to-day operations. She'd remain CEO, but she was delegating more, creating work-life balance, pursuing interests outside Montgomery Industries. The board looked shocked. Some looked concerned. A few looked calculating. But Claire didn't care. She was done living for other people's approval. That evening, she showed up at Nate's house with takeout and a teddy bear for Stella. A new friend for Mr. Patches, she said. Stella squealed with delight and immediately named it Ms. Claire Bear, which made the real Claire cry for the 3rd time in a week. They ate dinner together at Nate's small kitchen table, and it was nothing like the business dinners Claire was used to. No networking, no deals, no ulterior motives. Just a man and his daughter, and a woman learning how to be human again. I talked to your daddy about the shop, Claire told Stella while they cleared dishes. We're going to be partners. That means I'll be around a lot more. That's good, Stella said seriously. Daddy needs someone to help him. He tries to do everything by himself, and that makes him tired. We can't have that. Who's going to fix all the broken things if your daddy's too tired? You could help. Stella looked up at her with those two old eyes. Daddy says you're really smart about business things, and fixing cars is a business. So you could help fix the business, and he could fix the cars, and together you could fix everything. Claire glanced at Nate, who was trying not to smile. Is she always this wise? Always. It's exhausting. He ruffled Stella's hair affectionately. But she's right. Together we can fix a lot of things. Maybe even each other. The weeks that followed were hard in ways Claire hadn't anticipated. Stepping back from her role as CEO felt like cutting off a limb, painful and disorienting and wrong. Learning to be a business partner instead of a boss required patience she didn't have. Figuring out how to be around Nate and Stella without her armor felt like walking naked through fire. But slowly, impossibly, she learned. She learned that strength wasn't about being untouchable. It was about letting yourself be vulnerable with people who'd earned it. She learned that success wasn't measured in dollars or market share, but in the smile on a single father's face when you fixed his truck for half what he expected to pay. She learned that good things were everywhere if you just stopped long enough to notice them. 3 months after Marcus Webb's arrest, Claire Montgomery stood in the newly renovated Davies Street Automotive, now Montgomery Roads Automotive, and watched mechanics train people who'd been written off by society, ex-convicts learning skills that would help them find legitimate work, single parents getting free repairs and job training, kids from rough neighborhoods discovering that they were good at something. "You did this?" Nate said, appearing beside her with coffee that was actually good because Claire had sprung for a decent machine. "We did this," Claire corrected. "Fair point." He smiled and Claire felt that now familiar warmth in her chest. "Stella wants to know if you're coming to dinner Sunday. She's making a list of good things from her week and wants to compare it to yours." "My list is up to 43 things," Claire said proudly. "What's 43? "Mechanics who make terrible coffee but excellent partners." Nate laughed. "That's not even a subtle hint that I should stick to fixing cars." Subtlety is overrated. Claire set down her own coffee and looked at him seriously. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing something worth saving when everyone else just saw the Ice Queen. For fixing my car and my life. For teaching me that broken things can be beautiful." She touched the gear ring she now wore on a chain around her neck. Always there, always present, a reminder of promises and possibilities. For not giving up on me even when I'd given up on myself. Nate took her hand, their fingers interlacing with practiced ease. "You know what Stella asked me last night?" "What?" "She asked if you were going to be her bonus mom. Because in her words, Daddy needs someone to help him, and Ms. Claire needs someone to love her, and I need more people on my good things list." He smiled. "I told her that was a conversation you and I should have when you're ready." Claire's heart hammered. "And if I said I might be ready? Eventually? Not right now, but someday?" "Then I'd say we've got time. We've got all the time we need." Nate pulled her closer. "Because some repairs can't be rushed, Claire. They need patience and care and the understanding that healing happens slowly. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen." She kissed him then, properly this time. In the middle of their shop with mechanics pretending not to notice, and morning light streaming through windows that had been cleaned for the first time in years. She kissed him and felt pieces of herself clicking back together. Not perfect, not fixed, but whole in a way that mattered. "I love you," she whispered against his lips, and the words felt strange and wonderful and terrifying and right. "I love you too," Nate whispered back. "Now come on. We've got a truck to look at for a woman who's trying to escape an abusive relationship, and I promised her we'd get her mobile by tonight so she can leave safely." They walked hand in hand to the service bay, and Claire thought about how far she'd come from that morning 3 months ago when she'd stood in this same shop, mocking a quiet mechanic who'd turned out to be so much more than she expected. She thought about spark plugs and good things and little girls with broken hearts who saw possibilities instead of problems. She thought about being brave and being loved and being human instead of being perfect. And she added one more thing to her list. The day I learned that the best repairs are the ones that break you open first. 6 months later, on a Seattle Saturday that was uncharacteristically sunny, Claire Montgomery stood in front of 73 people, employees, friends, the community they'd built, and made an announcement. "Montgomery Roads Automotive is expanding.
We're opening 2 new locations, hiring 40 new staff, and launching a nonprofit program to provide free automotive training to at-risk youth. She looked at Nate, at Stella sitting in the front row with Mr. Patches and Ms. Claire Bear, at all the faces of people who'd become family. But more importantly, I'm announcing my retirement from Montgomery Industries effective next month. I'll retain my board seat, but I'm stepping down as CEO to focus full-time on this, on building something that matters. The applause was thunderous, but Claire barely heard it. She was looking at Nate, who stood up and walked to her and reached into his pocket for something small. "Since we're making announcements," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I have one too." He dropped to one knee and Claire's heart stopped. "Claire Montgomery, you fixed my engine when it was running on empty. You gave my daughter someone to look up to. You turned a failing repair shop into something that changes lives. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life fixing things with you?" The ring he held out was made of gears, tiny, intricate, welded together with such care and skill that it was both industrial and beautiful. Broken things made whole, damaged pieces made art. Claire looked at this man who'd saved her life, at his daughter who taught her how to make lists, at the community they'd built together from grease and hope and love. She thought about the woman she'd been, cold, isolated, measuring success with the wrong ruler, and the woman she was becoming, warm, connected, understanding that the best victories were the ones where everyone won. "Yes," she said through happy tears. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Yes to broken things being beautiful. Yes to good things lists. Yes to fixing the world one car at a time." She pulled him up and kissed him while everyone cheered. Yes to not being alone anymore. Stella ran up and hugged them both, and Claire felt small arms around her waist and Nate's arms around her shoulders, and thought about how 3 months ago she'd had 2 things on her good things list, and now she had hundreds. She thought about spark plugs and second chances, and the mechanics who understood that the most important repairs were the ones that couldn't be measured in money or horsepower. She thought about being fixed, and for the first time in 15 years, Claire Montgomery felt complete, not because she was successful or powerful or untouchable, but because she was loved, and in the end, that was the only thing that mattered. The shop stayed open late that night, celebrating with food and music and stories about all the lives they'd changed and would continue to change. Claire stood outside under stars she'd never bothered to notice before, holding Nate's hand, watching Stella teach other kids how to check oil and rotate tires. "You know what's funny?" Nate said quietly. "What?" "You came to my shop 3 months ago looking for someone to fix your car, and somehow you ended up fixing everything else instead." Claire smiled. "I think you've got that backward. You're the one who fixes things." "No." Nate kissed her forehead. "I just showed you where the tools were. You did the actual work." They stood there in the cooling Seattle evening, and Claire added one final item to her list of good things. "The moment I realized that being broken wasn't the end of the story, it was just the beginning of a better one." Behind them, the shop hummed with life and laughter and the sound of engines turning over, each one a small victory, each one proof that broken things could run again if you just cared enough to fix them right. And in a small house across town, a little girl's list sat on a nightstand with a new entry added in crayon. Number 100, when good people win. Because sometimes, against all odds and despite all the ways the world tried to break them, good people did win. They just had to be brave enough to let someone help them, and wise enough to know that the best things in life, the really good things, were never the ones you could buy. They were the ones you built together. One spark plug at a time.